It all begins at the entrance of the Demon Realm, where the Special Joint Attack Group was gathered. They announced that everyone should check their supplies, teams, and positions once more. There was a group of rookies, and one of them was nervously commenting that it was his first time seeing so many people involved in an attack. His friend reassured him, saying that they had the Flying Tiger sect as allies, so there was nothing to worry about, especially since it was said that attacks involving the Flying Tiger sect never resulted in casualties. Upon hearing this, the rookie remarked that he wished the sect would invite him to join. His friend responded that, with his current class, that would be impossible. Gangrem, who was nearby polishing his sword, overheard the entire conversation and started wondering if the Flying Tiger sect didn't choose its members solely based on their class. Otherwise, he wouldn't be there. The protagonist belonged to the Insectoid class and was affiliated with the Flying Tiger sect, Secret Escort. 5 years ago, after the Awakening Day, everyone's abilities were determined based on their Bazi destinies. The Bazi destiny accompanies each person from birth, depending on the day and time they were born. But Gangrem believes that destiny is just a load of nonsense. While he was lost in thought, someone tapped him on the back and asked if he was from the Flying Tiger sect. As if he were, they would be on the same team. The person seemed overly excited about fighting alongside someone from the sect. The protagonist paid little attention, thinking that he was just a rookie, since he didn't know him and had no reason to be talking to him. A group of friends nearby called the rookie over to join them. As the boy approached, one of the group members whispered to him to be careful with the guy he was talking to, because that was Gangrem. This terrified the young man, who hadn't realized whom he was speaking to. Discreetly, he glanced at the protagonist, but when he noticed Gangrem staring back at him, he was stunned, fearing something bad might happen. The protagonist noticed the boy's shocked expression and thought this was typical behavior for a rookie. Gangrem had killed his teammates and stolen their powers. Many people returned injured when they were on the same team as the protagonist. Death was written all over his destiny. If you were on the same team as Gangrem, you were bound to be unlucky. Such rumors spread due to his power. The protagonist opened the destiny window, where it showed his name, Gangrem of the Insectoid class, with affiliation to the Flying Tiger sect. His power was destiny detection from the Celestial class category. The protagonist could check both his own destiny window and that of others. Moreover, Gangrem could partially extract the destiny of a dead opponent and turn it into his own, but doing so increased his karma. Gangrem had a menacing power that allowed him to steal a corpse's destiny. It was also true that many people who had been his teammates ended up injured, and likely all of them were affected by the protagonist's destiny. The destiny categories are divided into 5. The highest category is Celestial, followed by Draconic, Phantasmal, Human, and Insectoid. These classes are further divided into primary, secondary, and tertiary categories. Gangrem's class was the worst of the worst, the bottom of the pit, the tertiary category of the Insectoids. In other words, the protagonist wasn't strong enough to kill another awakened individual. Additionally, there were several other conditions that needed to be met for him to use his power. The protagonist felt hurt because he had never killed nor stolen the destiny of a corpse. Thinking about it made him angry, so he always had to keep himself in check. Harang approached and asked Gangrem what he was doing alone. The protagonist was startled when the girl started speaking. Harang mentioned that it seemed like there would be a celebratory dinner after the extermination mission and wanted to know if Gangrem would attend. The girl was from the Celestial Tertiary class and was affiliated with the Flying Tiger sect. Taehun told the protagonist that he hadn't attended the last time, so he needed to go this time. The young man was of the secondary Phantasmal category, also affiliated with the Flying Tiger sect. Gangrem began to walk away and replied that he wasn't going. Taehun asked why he wouldn't go, and the protagonist answered that he was too lazy. But in truth, he thought that even if he did go, he would still be treated like trash by members of the other sex. Harang told Gangrem that she had even skipped the school field trip to be there, so he should attend. And if his reason for not wanting to go was because of the idiots who were afraid of him, she would take care of it. The protagonist responded by asking the girl if she realized he was at least 10 years older than her and didn't need help dealing with idiots. But the girl dismissed his words, claiming that Gangrem was weaker than her. Harang and Taehun approached the protagonist and insisted that he needed to attend the dinner, since everyone would be there. The girl continued, saying she would punch anyone who tried to bother him. Dohyun called out to Harang and Taehun, saying he understood they wanted to hang out with Gangrem, but the mission was about to start, so they needed to return to their positions. Dohyun was of the secondary human category class, also affiliated with the Flying Tiger sect. The girl started walking toward her post, saying she was on her way. Tae-hun did the same and asked Gangrim to promise he would attend the celebratory dinner. The protagonist didn't respond and simply bid farewell to his friends. Do-hyun approached Gangrim and told him to take care. The protagonist replied that the groups ahead were the ones in danger, and that, being at the rear, he would be fine. Do-hyun still expressed concern. The protagonist reassured him, and as he walked, thought that he would have liked to fight alongside his comrades. It wasn't long before they announced that the special annihilation mission of the Demon Realm was about to begin, and that everyone should fulfill their assigned duties related to their groups. After the announcement, the portal began to expand. The protagonist thought that he would only need to handle any remaining demons in the rear, and that he had to do his best not to cause trouble for the sect. Gangrim prepared for battle. High-class demons were arriving, and the order for the front line to advance was given, while the rear line prepared to enter. Do-hyun, Harang, and Tae-hun were at the front, confronting the demons. Do-hyun used magic to attack the creatures. Tae-hun fought with gauntlets, and Harang attacked while mounted on a wooden tiger, wielding a sword. Lesser demons were summoned, and the support group, positioned at the rear, was ordered to prepare for combat. Meanwhile, the front line was to ignore the low-class demons and hold their positions. As the demons began to emerge, the protagonist wasted no time and immediately launched his attack. The battle was intense, with too many creatures. Gangrim was starting to run out of breath and thought that there were more monsters than expected, and being in the rear, it was difficult to breathe due to the demonic energy. While the protagonist was reflecting on the need to get out of there quickly, he didn't notice a demon approaching from behind, and before he knew it, he was attacked and thrown to the ground. The demons quickly realized Gangrim was down, and as he defended himself from a creature already on top of him, several others drew near. Putting in all the effort he could, the protagonist began to call for help, feeling that this could be the end for him. A strong light suddenly emerged along with numerous thorny branches, annihilating the group of demons. The leader of the Flying Tiger sect, who possessed that power, was even protecting the rear during the battle. Gangrim thanked Shin, the sect leader, who was of the tertiary celestial category class, affiliated as the master of the Flying Tiger sect. Suddenly, a massive explosion occurred, startling Shin. Everyone grew tense upon seeing the boss. The protagonist was confused, since there should have been a long path before reaching him, but now he had appeared prematurely. The demonic mammoth was there, ready for destruction. They quickly announced that the boss was present and that fire-type warriors should advance to the front line. Just as the creature was about to attack, it was cut in half without even having a chance to fight back. The strike was so impactful that the frontline warriors couldn't even see what was happening. The demonic mammoth was split in two, and a woman emerged from the dust, asking where Gangrim was. No one understood what was happening, and began to question who this person was and what was going on. The protagonist also wondered who this woman was who had single-handedly killed the boss and why she was asking for him. The warrior pointed her sword at everyone on the front line, and with a powerful strike, declared that she would kill them all, presuming that Gangrim was among them. The protagonist hid behind the thorny branches and thought of using his destiny detection first. He activated his destiny detection power. The woman was Bayek, of the primary celestial class, and this destiny was being protected. Gangrim was astonished to discover that this woman was of the primary celestial category, as he had never encountered this class before. Beck's ability was regression, allowing her to return to the past with her current memories intact, but it couldn't be used after death. After witnessing the power the woman possessed, the protagonist considered descending to where she was, thinking she might be there for some information about him. But Shin, using her distant whisper technique, ordered Gangrim to stay where he was, as she would handle the situation herself. Perched on the branches, Shin asked Beck what she wanted. The woman responded to the leader, asking if she was Gangrim. The sect leader stated that he was a member of her sect and that she could speak. Beck replied with a simple no, and with one strike, killed several warriors in front of her. After that, she declared that she would kill everyone, assuming that Gangrim was among them. Shin declared that she would not forgive Bayek and launched into an attack. The protagonist began striking the branches with his sword, saying that he was the one the woman was looking for, and that he should present himself before it was too late. Cutting through the branches, Gangrim begged Shin to let him go. The warriors ran in panic, shouting that the woman was an assassin and they needed to save themselves. Meanwhile, the leader of the Flying Tiger sect battled Bake, who offered to spare the others if they would just hand over Gangrim. Shin responded that she would not allow Bake to kill any member of her sect. The woman then delivered a powerful blow, sending the leader crashing into the wall, leaving her gravely wounded and unable to react. Beck moved in to finish the fight, but members of the Flying Tiger sect rushed to defend their leader. Seeing this, The woman quickly tried to deliver a fatal blow to Shin, but Do-yeon stepped in to block it and began to duel with Baek. She was extremely skilled, and with just a few moves defeated him, placing her sword at his throat. Tae-hun immediately attacked, but was effortlessly stopped before he could reach Baek. Some warriors tried to help, but a barrier was raised, preventing them from passing. This barrier was created by Baek, who was frantically searching for Gangram, who was desperately cutting through the branches that restrained him. The protagonist, after some struggle, managed to cut through the branches and fell to the ground, where a river of blood had already been spilled by the woman. Baek approached Gangram, who, upon seeing her, thought it was too late. The protagonist told the woman that she could have just killed him and didn't need to do all this because of him, a mere insectoid category member. Baek raised her sword and prepared to strike, saying that he must be Gangram, but before she could attack, Shin intervened with her branches, telling the woman not to dare touch a member of her sect. The leader resumed her intense duel with Baek, who remarked that she couldn't understand why Shin wouldn't just hand over Gangram to save everyone. The woman managed to deliver a fatal blow to Shin, who, clutching the arm holding the sword that pierced her chest, declared that it was her duty as sect leader to protect her members. The protagonist witnessed his leader being killed right before his eyes. After Shin's death, the barrier dissipated. Seeing that scene, Gangram began to cry, realizing that he was now going to die, as he stood no chance against Baek in a duel. Now he understood that the woman was there to kill him, and that he was the only one who should have died. However, upon seeing Shin's lifeless body, his thoughts became even more muddled. The protagonist started checking the corpses around him, and a message appeared, asking if he wished to use his destiny extraction power. Gangram activated the ability, and a message warned that karma would accumulate upon using this power. At that moment, there were 421 dead in the area. The message prompted him to choose which destinies he wished to extract. Despite his hesitation, Gangram chose all 421. Now he had to search for destinies that could be stolen. The protagonist thought that all of this happened because of his fault, due to having only an insect-level destiny. However, because of his low magical rank, only one condition would be extracted. Gangram began to wonder how many people had died because of Baek. Soon, a message appeared indicating that, due to the influx of targets, the destinies would be extracted randomly. The protagonist reflected that those who hated him were right. His magic began to increase as he absorbed portions of magic from the targets, and he gained the skill White Flower Blooming. Gangram recalled people accusing him of killing others, and also remembered his friends who had promised to protect him. The protagonist also gained the skill Secret Formation Technique, and his resistance to the water attribute increased. He began to spiral into despair, asserting that all of this was his fault. Messages kept appearing, indicating that Gangram had gained new abilities. Now he had received the skill 1,000-pound axe and the ability to walk on air. The protagonist thought that his destiny had killed everyone, and that it was all his fault. In the end, Gangram obtained the skill 3-leaf method, stealing the destinies of 421 people. Baek approached him, and he declared that now he had nothing left but to die. However, the protagonist struck a blow, hitting the woman, and screamed that it was actually her fault. After being wounded, Baek began to duel with Gangram, who, while fighting, thought that he could not let things end this way, and that he would get his revenge on that woman before dying. The Swordmaster skill activated, as did the Eagle Eyes ability. The protagonist was engaged in an intense duel with Baek, while his new abilities activated automatically. The Reflexes skill was triggered, and Gangram continued attacking frantically. Other abilities also activated, such as Golden Buddha, Harden, and Pain Resistance, after being struck. The Walk on Air ability also activated, allowing him to dodge her attacks more easily. While still airborne, the protagonist activated the 1,000-pound axe, noticing that Baek had lowered her guard. But as he approached to strike her, the woman noticed and used her Summoned Ice ability, hitting the protagonist squarely, causing him to crash to the ground. He admitted that even with several new abilities, they were useless if he didn't know how to utilize them. Fortunately, some activated automatically, but he couldn't take full advantage of them due to the weak body he possessed, or his inadequate weapon. Baek, conjuring several ice spikes, taunted the protagonist, saying that even after he stole the destinies of 421 people, he still couldn't exact his revenge as he should. She then fired the spikes toward Gangram, who managed to dodge most of them but ended up getting hit in the leg. The protagonist thought that if only he understood the full potential of his abilities, he might be able to make a difference. Then he remembered one skill he knew well. Gangram begins to pull out the stake lodged in his leg, noticing Baek approaching, taunting that his efforts were futile and that he was destined to die. The protagonist manages to remove the ice stake and considers using it as a weapon. He also activates the three-leaf method ability, creating several thorny branches. Having observed this skill for years, he already understood enough about how it worked. Gangrim forces Beck to retreat as he creates branches that try to wound her in every possible way. Seeing that the protagonist did not easily give up, Beck initially thought he was merely a swordsman, but now it seemed he was also well versed in spells. While she effortlessly cut down the branches as if they were nothing, she thought those spells would be difficult for him to sustain for long. Beck was so focused on slicing through the branches in front of her that she failed to notice Gangrim approaching from behind. Using the ice stake, the protagonist plunged it into her throat, leaving her no chance to react. Gangrim pulled out the stake and smiled, having finally avenged himself by killing Beck. He collapsed to the ground, and despite the hard impact and his injuries, he was satisfied that it was all over. Then he began coughing up blood until his new regeneration ability activated. However, Gangrim soon deactivated the ability, thinking that nothing would change if he remained alive. Neither before nor now would anything be different. When the protagonist was young, he had been told that his destiny was filled with perseverance and death, that he would lose his parents early, and that his life would be plagued with misfortune. Just as the fortune teller had predicted, Gangrim lost his parents before he could even mature, and he became entangled in numerous accidents. Everyone around him suffered tragedies. The protagonist was destined to be weak and miserable, yet even so, his friends accepted him, and ultimately died because of him. Now, Gangrim thought it would have been better if he had sought out Beck first, for if he had been the first to die, everything would have turned out fine. The protagonist reflected that if he could turn back time, he could change things. Then, he remembered the regression ability of the primary celestial category that the woman had possessed, allowing her to return to the past with her memories intact. However, that ability couldn't be used if one was already dead. Gangrim activated the Destiny Extraction ability and obtained the regression skill. The protagonist did not know exactly how far back he would go, but even so, he activated the ability, wishing it would take him to a time before he met Beck. He hoped for the best. A bright light began to envelop him, and suddenly he saw a message appear on the palm of his hand. When he hit the ground, he found himself back at his home. Still confused by everything that was happening, he heard the doorbell ring. Shin was outside, wanting to come in, saying she was there to have her horoscope read. Gangrim came to his senses and, still trembling, let her in, realizing that he truly had returned. Once inside, the young man commented that this was their first meeting and that he was eager to know how compatible they were. Gangrim couldn't take his eyes off Shin, who this time was without her mask. He sighed in relief, realizing that he had indeed returned and that his friend was neither dead nor had lost her eyes. While responding to Do-hyun, Gangrim swore that he would not let those tragedies repeat. The protagonist handed a piece of paper and a pen to the young man, asking him to write down his name, birth date, and time of birth. The young man wrote quickly, but Shin took a bit longer, and Gangrim noticed she seemed slightly uncomfortable with the situation. The protagonist remembered that his friend had once been involved with a strange man before, which had not ended well. Gangrim then decided to make sure Shin knew everything in advance. He took the papers and said he would check their compatibility. The protagonist explained to the young man that his horoscope showed he was of the solid gold type and that the woman was of the wood type. Horoscopes like this are called gold-cutting wood, indicating terrible compatibility, where the axe cuts the tree. The magnate was taken aback, as was Shin. She smiled and said their compatibility was poor, and that there was no other choice. The man began to get frustrated and asked the protagonist if he was joking, demanding to speak with the manager. Gangrim, smiling, responded that the manager was at the counter. The man, left speechless but still furious, told the woman they should leave since he couldn't believe anything the protagonist was saying. Feeling a bit awkward, Shin asked Gangrim to read her fortune. The man, now losing his patience, told her she would regret it, claiming she thought she could find another man like him. The protagonist intervened, saying that the woman had no such intention and that the exit was over there. This only made the man angrier, and he stormed out, slamming the door and shouting that she'd better not come crawling back. Despite the uncomfortable situation, Shin seemed calmer, but remarked that she thought places like this only spoke of the good things in life. Gangrim said nothing, but he thought that, normally, that was the case, just not here. Smiling, Shin told the protagonist he seemed good at what he did and asked if he could read her fortune. Gangrim agreed. However, something unusual began to happen. The room's light shifted, the ground began to tremble, and a message appeared, indicating that the protagonist's attributes were being recalculated based on his destiny. Gangrim started to feel a buzzing in his ears and dizziness, something he had anticipated. But still, there wasn't much he could do until the sensation subsided. Shin, Noticing the protagonist's reaction, shouted for them to take cover under the table. She grabbed him by the arm and pulled him down. Gangrym remembered that, in his previous life, this same woman had protected him as best as she could. But now, wanting to change the future, he knew he had to stay focused. After a while, the tremors ceased, and Shin began to wonder what that strange message about destiny and attributes meant. The protagonist, standing by the door, observed the scene and thought it would be best not to get involved with Shin. However, she called out to him, asking him to wait and not leave her alone. Gangrym moved to another room, searching for something decent to use as a weapon, and quickly found what he needed. Shin caught up to him, grabbing his arm, and asked where he was going, insisting they needed to evacuate. They ran down the corridor until they reached a door from which screams were coming. Suddenly, several people appeared, shouting that there were monsters and they needed to escape. Shin saw a man who had fallen behind, being attacked by a monster biting his leg. Though she wanted to help, she said there was nothing she could do. At that moment, Gangrym, armed with a knife, rushed forward and cut down the creature attacking the man, as he had already known the monsters were coming and had sought a weapon in advance. They were giant worms of the tertiary insectoid category. Normally, these creatures fed on grass, but they could also devour animals and humans. The protagonist began shouting for everyone to find shelter while he dealt with the creatures that had already entered the building. After killing the last one near him, he heard cries for help from another area, deducing that there were more creatures around. Gangrym shouted to the people that, if they didn't want to die, they should grab anything to defend themselves, because these insects weren't that strong. He noticed that Shin had grabbed a fire extinguisher and killed a worm that was attacking the group. Smiling, she remarked that these creatures really weren't as tough as they seemed, as she had easily taken one down. Gangrym felt relieved seeing the girl take action, and found it amusing to see someone capable of slaying a dragon be so pleased with herself for killing a giant worm. The protagonist then informed the people that now that the stairs were clear, it would be best to go down before more of those creatures appeared. Everyone rushed to find shelter, thanking Gangrym, who, after putting away his knife, collected the spirit pearls from the creatures while he still had the chance. Even though they were of low rank, they were worth far more than he had expected. Shin waited for the protagonist and asked if he wasn't going to head down. Gangrym cleaned the pearls, and while pocketing them, asked her why she hadn't evacuated yet. She replied that she couldn't leave him behind. The protagonist knew the girl, so he asked if she was worried about someone she had just met. Shin replied that she was. Gangrym realized she hadn't changed at all, so he told her that the situation was dangerous because they didn't know what might happen next. The girl responded that, for that reason, they should stick together. The protagonist then decided to tell Shin the truth, so that she could help him. He said he needed to share something important, which piqued her curiosity. Gangrym revealed that her name was Shin, and that her class was of the tertiary draconian category. The girl asked the protagonist what he was talking about because she didn't understand. Gangrym explained that her attribute was wood and that she possessed a skill called the tree leaf method. He opened a destiny window for her, and when she saw it, she confirmed that she was indeed looking at the skill called tree leaf method. The protagonist asked her if she remembered the announcement they had heard in the hall, explaining that it indicated that everyone had gained superpowers. After Gangrym explained the situation to Shin, he hoped that now they wouldn't die unless they encountered Beck again. The girl, still looking at her destiny window, admitted that she now felt stronger, although she didn't know why. The protagonist turned on his phone's flashlight and said they needed to go down the stairs. As they descended, Shin asked Gangrym what his destiny type was. He replied that it would be better if they didn't share the contents of their destiny windows, as otherwise, others might be able to view them too. The protagonist's destiny window was the same as it was 5 years ago, and didn't seem to retain the abilities he had extracted before his regression. Gangrym belonged to the tertiary insectoid category, with a fire attribute. His primary ability was destiny detection, of the tertiary draconian category, which allowed him to check his own destiny window as well as others. He also had the destiny extraction ability of the same category, enabling him to partially extract the destiny of a deceased opponent and transform it into his own, without increasing his karma. However, something different was showing up. Gangrym had accumulated a significant amount of karma. The protagonist thought this was likely the result of extracting the destinies of 421 people. Yet, if he wanted to change the future, he would need to use the destiny extraction ability again. Accumulating more karma at this point was dangerous. Karma is accumulated when committing crimes like murder or using a specific ability, and if too much karma is accumulated, the target crosses a boundary. The protagonist recalled that everyone who crossed that boundary had suffered. Shin suddenly stopped descending the stairs and went to another area, alerting Gangrym that someone seemed to be there. Indeed, there was a person completely bandaged up. Shin and Gangrym rushed toward them, saying they would save them. As they approached, a creature appeared, but the protagonist swiftly killed it with his knife. The girl asked her companion if there was anyone inside those bandages. Gangrym replied that the easiest way to check if someone was still alive would be to use the Destiny Extraction ability. After checking, a message appeared indicating that the number of nearby deceased was 1. The protagonist confirmed that the person was dead and surmised that if they had awakened a decent ability, they might have survived. Gangrym checked the Destiny window and discovered that the person had the flame manipulation skill of the tertiary insectoid category, which allowed them to summon and control a small flame. The user could attack from a distance as long as the target was visible. The protagonist considered acquiring this skill, and a message appeared stating that he had gained the flame manipulation ability and, as a penalty, had accumulated karma. Even so, Gangrym was pleased because he needed abilities like this, which were perfect for him. Shin noticed something happening up ahead, so she started running to see what it was. As they approached, they saw a young man effortlessly killing several creatures, as if it were merely entertainment for him. While striking the giant worms, the young man shouted for the boss to appear already because it was too easy. After finishing off the creatures, he noticed Gangrym and Shin watching him, and was surprised to see more survivors. The young man asked the protagonist if they were characters meant to ally with him, extending his hand and introducing himself as Gojun. Gangrym also introduced himself, remembering that this was how Gojun had first started out. Smiling, the young man asked for the heroine's name. Shin found it strange that he called her a heroine, but she introduced herself nonetheless. Gojun said he would remember their names, and remarked that now that the alliance event was over, the game should begin soon. Shin asked what he was talking about, and the young man explained that game introductions follow a certain formula, and that's what was happening. Gojun belonged to the tertiary celestial category, with a gold attribute. His ability was the Dreamer of the primary celestial category. The lines between dreams and reality blur. The user is less affected by phantasmal energy, and his resistance to pain and fear are all fixed at the primary draconian level. The protagonist knew that Gojun would soon become the leader of one of the 5 great sects. However, seeing that he was already capable of all this even before fully awakening his ability was impressive. The young man commented that, in games you either defeat the boss with allies, gain a strong ally during the battle, or perhaps awaken a power thanks to a companion's sacrifice. No one quite understood what Gojun was saying since, despite being a famous web novel writer, he was quite eccentric. As they were talking, someone ran toward them, pleading for help as monsters were chasing him. Suddenly, an enormous worm of the primary insectoid category appeared, a monster composed of multiple insects. This creature could only be defeated if all the insects comprising it were killed. It had the same eating habits as the giant worms. The man couldn't escape and was quickly captured by several giant worms. Shin was horrified to witness the scene, as the man was devoured right in front of her. Gojun casually remarked that it seemed like this was the prologue boss they had to defeat. Hearing this, the girl asked if he seriously intended to fight that creature, suggesting that running away might be the best option. Gangrym activated his flame manipulation ability and began attacking the monster. Gojun called the protagonist a mage, saying he knew he could count on him, but then asked if he really thought they could kill that giant worm. The protagonist replied that they couldn't, at least not yet. For now, they were just going to set it on fire. Suddenly, the creature charged forward. Instantly, Gangrym shouted for everyone to run. As he ran, he continued launching flames at the worm, but quickly realized that the creature had figured out that his attacks were ineffective. They were about to escape when the monster broke through the wall. Shin screamed for Gangrym to hurry up and catch up to them, but it was already too late. The worm had managed to get past the protagonist by breaking through the wall and was now in front of him. Gojun urged Shin not to stop running, even though she wanted to help Gangrym, who was now face to face with the creature, trapped with no way out. Shin and Gojun were at the other end of the corridor, trying to find a way to help the protagonist, who kept launching flames to draw the creature's attention, causing it to attack him in response. Gangrym managed to dodge the attacks, thinking that, given how the situation had changed, he needed to buy time. After distracting the monster, Gojun pulled Shin out of the room, even as she continued to want to help the protagonist. But the young man's only focus was on escaping. Gangrym believed he could still make it out alive, thinking he just needed to hold on until the Destiny Protection Agency arrived. The protagonist hoped his attacks would inflict more damage, but when they didn't, he threw himself to the ground while running, turning around to aim his flames directly into the creature's mouth. Seeing how the worm reacted, Gangram thought his plan had worked, but he soon realized that the creature was recovering and still advancing toward him. This made the situation even worse, since he was on the ground and couldn't react in time. Suddenly, someone threw a piece of wood at the creature, managing to wound it. Shin had come back to help the protagonist. She told him to run while she bought him some time. Several giant worms began to emerge from inside the monster and attacked her, but Shin defended herself with the wooden pieces she was holding. Gangram used his flame ability to drive the creatures back temporarily and shouted to the girl to use the three-leaf method. Shin responded that she couldn't since she needed plants in the area. The protagonist insisted that he was sure it would work with sawdust too. Without wasting any more time, Shin attempted to use her ability. To her surprise, it worked, so she focused harder, making multiple branches grow and delivering a powerful strike against the giant worm. Shin was amazed by what she had done, but quickly began pulling Gangram so they could escape. However, she soon noticed that more creatures were emerging from the monster she had just defeated. The worms were surrounding Gangram and Shin, leaving them with no way out. The protagonist acted quickly, activating his flame ability while Shin thought that this would be the end for her, even though she had come to help him. He combined his flame ability with the branches, which intensified the fire. A message appeared stating that Gangram's and Shin's destinies were intertwining and that the girl's destiny was strengthening the protagonist's. The flames grew more intense, incinerating all the creatures at once. A new message appeared, indicating that the flame manipulation ability had temporarily evolved from tertiary insectoid to primary insectoid category. Gangram knew that abilities were assigned based on Bazi destinies, and that the logic of Bazi horoscopes applied in battle. Trees feed the flames. Gangram defeated the primary insectoid category giant worm, and now his achievements were being calculated. Shin cheered as they successfully defeated the creature and noticed that the protagonist had collapsed to the ground. Worried, she asked if he was all right. Exhausted, Gangram assured her he was fine. The protagonist received a bonus reward for defeating an enemy stronger than himself. Shin carried her companion as he recovered from mana depletion that had left him anemic. She mentioned that they were already on the first floor and that the exit appeared to be clear. However, upon opening the door, Shin didn't recognize the place, but quickly recalled that she was sure that building was supposed to be in the middle of the city. A bright light began to surround them, and the item in the room, restoring their vitality. The protagonist realized that it was a totem since he hadn't expected the first floor to also be connected to that place. The totem was of tertiary draconian category, containing the energy of suppression and satisfaction. It healed humans in its vicinity and prevented demonic beasts from approaching. The door they had just passed through disappeared, and Shin asked Gangram what they should do now. He suggested they should rest, since, at least for now, there were no monsters around. Suddenly, Gojun appeared, asking how they had managed to survive. Shin was not pleased to see him. The young man remarked that it was strange for the heroine Shin to have abandoned him. Before he could finish his sentence, the girl, furious, retorted that she was no damn heroine, and that he was the villain who betrayed his friends and was the only one who made it out alive. Gojun froze, saying that made no sense, and that he wasn't a villain. Gangram urged Shin to follow him, noticing that the young writer was worse off than before. More people began appearing in the room, confused about where they were, and quickly realized that their injuries were healing. Some tried to get their cell phones to work, but soon noticed there was no signal. Many were still frightened and unable to comprehend what was happening. Suddenly, an intense light began to emanate from someone standing near the totem. She introduced herself as Anavi from the Central Branch of the Destiny Protection Agency, and announced that from that moment on, she intended to manage everyone present. Shin wondered what this so-called Destiny Protection Agency was. The people in the room began to revolt, shouting that this was a kidnapping, demanding to be let out, and questioning what all of this meant. The protagonist, observing the chaos, knew that this was the true beginning. He admitted that he had been a failure in his past life, but this time would be different, because he was determined to become as strong as possible before leaving. Anavi explained that the demon realm would soon emerge and bring chaos. Before the representative could finish her explanation, people began to accuse her, asking if the insects from before were her doing and threatening to sue her if they weren't allowed to leave. Taehun shouted for everyone to shut up, calling them stupid extras, and she adds that all those people did not understand that this opportunity was special. Gangram, seeing the young man's reaction, thinks that he was the same as always. But he wasn't wrong in what he was saying, because being chosen to be there was indeed a privilege. Anavi then says that it would be easier if she showed what was happening outside. With a snap of her fingers, an image of what was going on in the streets of Seoul appears. She explains that across the nation, An extraterrestrial space called the Demon Realm had appeared, and now monsters were emerging from it. The Destiny Protection Agency had foreseen this, and so, a few years ago, her group, the Cheshas, who awakened their abilities before everyone else, began training for this very day. However, in a world of chaos, they needed many more awakened ones. Anavi continues, explaining that this was the reason all those people were gathered here, as the Cheshas believed they had the greatest potential among the non-awakened. Moreover, the Cheshas would help everyone to awaken and grow stronger under the management of the Destiny Protection Agency. The representative of the agency then states that they can now leave whenever they want, but advises them to decide only after checking what their abilities are, as it might change their minds. The Destiny window appears for Gangrim, revealing that he is of the tertiary insectoid class with the flame attribute. His powers include destiny detection, destiny theft, and flame manipulation. All the people had their destiny windows opened. Some were surprised by the abilities they had, others by their class. The protagonist thought that Anavi was hiding her true power, and he was eager to check the destiny of the representative, but since her face was covered with a mask, it would be difficult. Anavi addresses the people, saying that they should all have seen their abilities by now, and could think of them as supernatural powers, or magic. The woman explains that those who have awakened use these abilities to hunt monsters and carry out raids in the demon realm to eliminate threats, but it's a very dangerous job, and in this process, they might die. Anavi adds that furthermore, the same applies to the training process, but if they wish to avoid such danger and prefer to be protected, they should relinquish their abilities, because a person without the will to fight does not need powers. The woman claps her hands and announces that they will have exactly 1 hour to decide. They could rest on the second floor, where manuals would also be provided. The representative advises everyone to read them, and after 1 hour, those who decided to stay could return here, while those who chose to leave could exit through the third floor door. However, as she mentioned, once they leave, they would never be able to view their destiny window again. Anavi bids farewell and says she'll see everyone in an hour. After the time passes, the representative assumes that all who remained were willing to participate in the training. The woman reveals the first gate to those who stayed. She explains that a maximum of 3 people could enter at once, and if they successfully completed the raid or exited through the gate, they would end up back in that room. Each room requires a different method that they can check upon entering. Each person needs to kill 6 monsters. Anavi informs them that the first room has no limit on attempts, but if they exit before finishing, they will have to start from scratch. The woman shows a box containing items that will be provided to everyone, and they need to pick one before entering the supply center. If they get injured, they can use the healing items they have or return to the lobby to be healed by the totems. The representative also explains that everyone must sign contracts agreeing that the Destiny Protection Agency will not be held liable in case of death, but the Cheshas plan to support them as much as possible to prevent that from happening. Anavi bids them good luck and departs. Soon after, a young man raises his hand and says he's looking for someone to join him, mentioning that his power is primary phantasmal. After the first person did this, several others started doing the same, announcing their classes in an attempt to form groups. Gangrim begins to walk away, thinking that now it had turned into something like a marketplace. Suddenly, Shin runs up to the protagonist, calling his name. The girl says she wanted to thank him for what happened earlier in the building, and since he didn't have a group and neither did she asks if he would like to go with her. The protagonist is paralyzed and cannot respond. Shin calls out to him again to check if he's okay. Gangrim, looking at the girl, begins to tremble, as her gratitude reminds him that everyone could have survived if he had died, realizing that it was all his fault. Shin, seeing the state he's in, asks if he's feeling all right. Gangrim says he's fine, even as he agonizes over his memories, but he quickly turns and tells her he'll have to decline her offer, adding that he feels more comfortable being alone. Shin, taken aback, says she thought they had done well when facing the creatures together. The protagonist tells her that she would be better off with others. Unable to hold back any longer, Shin tells Gangrim that even if he doesn't want to hunt together, she will still be under his care. The protagonist reassures her that it's okay. He then heads to where the supply boxes are kept, noting that only 1 box per person can be taken, which contains a training sword, an HP recovery potion, and a mana recovery potion. Gangrim opens his box and retrieves his primary insect rank training sword, an HP recovery potion that heals twice as fast, and a mana recovery potion that restores twice as quickly. He thinks to himself that it's hard to get items at the beginning, so being a trainee isn't too bad, especially since HP recovery potions are expensive, and they even provided refills. Gojin notices that Gangrim is alone and calls out to him, saying he couldn't leave his only companion behind. The protagonist thinks it would be better to pretend he didn't hear anything, as this didn't happen in his past life, and it was better to avoid him. But the young writer runs up to Gangnam, grabbing his shoulder, telling him to wait for him. Gojun insists that if things continued this way, the two of them would be the protagonists of this story, and should therefore enter the room together. Gangnam replies that he prefers to be alone, yet the lunatic writer persists, assuring him not to worry since he was different from the extras who would only slow him down. He was as strong as a protagonist in a story. Gojun categorizes people into three types: protagonists, supporting characters, and extras, as if they were characters in a drama. Gangnam finds it strange because, in his previous life, the writer had treated him like an extra, but now he seemed to believe Gangnam was strong. The protagonist then contemplates that it would be much more comfortable to have a strong companion. He considers Shin, who is strong, but knows she would be unhappy if she stayed by his side, so it's better to keep her away. However, if something happened to Gojun, it wouldn't matter as much. Seeing that Gangnam was deep in thought, Gojun asks if he had changed his mind. After some time thinking, the protagonist decides it would be better if they went together. Gojun can hardly believe the answer he got and runs off excitedly, saying he will grab a supply box before they head out. Shin is also grabbing her box, and after Gojun approaches, he mentions that he wanted to talk to the story's mascot who was handing out the boxes, but decides to leave that for later. The writer asks Shin why she was looking at him that way. Was it because she wasn't a heroine? Shin just stared at him and didn't respond. Gojun, now running back, tells Gangnam that he's ready. As they begin to pass through the portal, a message appears, indicating that they could feel the presence of death and the presence of a metal ghost. Gangnam and Gojun entered the Mountain of Inferno Blades. There, all the rooms were connected by 4 corridors, and in each room and corridor, one could encounter demonic monsters, traps, and even safe zones. Their goal was to find the exit and leave alive. A message appeared indicating that the Mountain of Inferno Blades was starting. Gangnam told his partner that the objective was to find the exit, and he immediately started wondering if the structure was the same as in his previous life. If it was, he already knew the way. Gojun began to ask what might appear next, monsters or traps, as he was already eager to see. The protagonist quickly pulled his partner away when he noticed he was standing on a trap, from which a blade was emerging from the ground. Seeing this, the writer commented that it was a classic trap, smiling as he added that he liked classic things. Gangnam paid little attention and started walking away, leaving his partner behind. After walking through the corridors for a while, Gojun remarked that it seemed there were no more traps and that the protagonist was quite lucky for that to be the case. Gangnam replied that it was the opposite, as he was actually quite unlucky. Soon, they stopped after hearing something coming from the end of the corridor. The protagonist asked his partner if he had distributed his experience points. He responded affirmatively, saying he had done so while reading the manual. At the end of the corridor, there were several skeletal specters. They were of tertiary insect rank, monsters made of human bones that craved human flesh, had poor hearing, and were sensitive to light. Gojun commented that those creatures seemed stronger than insects, but since they were no longer in the tutorial, perhaps that was why they were tougher, and even though there were many of them, if they combined their forces, they could easily defeat them. Gangnam used his fire manipulation skill to attack, launching a fireball at the skeletons, drawing their attention. The creatures began to charge forward to attack. The protagonist already had a plan in mind. With the entrance being narrow, the creatures would advance all at once, making it easier to take them down. Gojun, who was attacking alongside Gangnam, asked if he was a clever character. The protagonist, drawing his sword, told him that if he kept spouting nonsense, they might as well leave. The fight against the skeletons began, and Gangnam demonstrated considerable combat skill, managing to defeat the creatures by combining quick strikes and using the sword as leverage. Gojun declared he couldn't let his partner take all the glory, so he rushed forward at full speed, striking a skeleton and sending it flying. Gangnam continued using his fire abilities to attack the creatures approaching from a distance. After defeating several skeletons, Gojun remarked that this was actually quite fun, but as they progressed through more rooms, the writer told the protagonist that every room they entered was filled with monsters, and that now it was getting boring, as it felt like they had killed more than 100. Gangnam asked if his partner was getting tired. Gojun, while sheathing his sword, said no, because they were just monsters and not as strong as they seemed. Plus, he had learned how to fight with swords in case he ever ended up in another world, or got transmigrated into a book. The protagonist listened to all of this, thinking about how much nonsense Gojun was spouting, but the writer wasn't done talking, and now said that, more importantly, When he first saw the protagonist, he was curious about one thing. Gangram asked what it was. Gojun then inquired if by any chance he had regressed, returned, reincarnated, or something like that. The protagonist was startled upon hearing this, as no one was supposed to know what had happened. He then told his partner that if he kept talking nonsense, it would be better for him to leave. Gojun smiled and said that was fair. Gangram began to push him along, saying they had wasted enough time and needed to move on. The writer insisted that he wasn't joking, and said that the protagonist was special because he was strangely calm, adapted very quickly, and showed no fear of monsters. Gangram replied that when he was a child, he had seen many ghosts, so he was used to such things. Gojun smiles and says he's curious to know more about the protagonist's past, but just as he's about to press Gangram for more details, he gets a strong shove because the ground begins to collapse. The writer looks on in horror, unsure of what to do, but Gangram yells at him to run. Gojun manages to reach solid ground where the floor stops crumbling. Looking back, he can no longer see the protagonist and wonders if, despite being the main character, he actually died. Gojun mutters that he loves stories about regression, but it's a pity that this happened. Meanwhile, as Gangram is falling, he draws his sword and drives it into the wall, slowing his descent, and lands on the ground without taking any damage. A message appears, indicating he has entered a secret area, along with a warning that monsters in secret areas are stronger than those in normal areas, and each path has either a monster or a trap to face. After this, another message pops up, saying that the path to the normal area has been activated, but once he returns, the secret path will be sealed. Gangram has the option to request a rescue, and if he chooses to give up, the time remaining for the rescue is 2 minutes and 58 seconds. However, the protagonist decides he won't give up so easily, because here, he can gain more attributes than he had imagined. Gangram now stands before a group of skeletons, thanks to having entered all the monster-filled rooms with Gojun, but he asserts that he needs a chance to evolve on his own. Activating his flame ability, he charges into battle, taking on all the creatures at once. This results in his attributes increasing by 10 points each time he defeats a monster. As Gangram continues to defeat the group of skeletons, his strength rises to stage 4 after using his attribute points, and upon wiping out the entire group, his strength reaches stage 5 after allocating more attribute points. The protagonist thinks that things are becoming easier as he increases his attributes, and he didn't expect to be able to boost them by so many points. Gangram's strength is now at stage 5, while his vitality, agility, and senses are at stage 4, and his magic at stage 3. Seeing his status, the protagonist wonders how strong he can become. Regardless of attributes, everyone starts at stage 1. The difference between each stage lies in the amount of time and effort required to reach the next stage. Even if one gains the same amount of experience, the growth rate will be much higher if their class is superior. The protagonist knows that people in the God class, like Gojun, will evolve much faster, and since they've been separated for some time now, Gojun is likely much stronger than before. Gojun was the first to clear the Mountain of Inferno Blades, so he already has an advantage. Gangram, while walking, contemplates obtaining the first clear bonus, but to achieve it, he needs to finish this by the end of the day. After a while, he realizes it's time to face the boss because, as he walks through the tunnel, he senses that this place is different from all the surrounding areas. It now truly feels like he's in the Mountain of Blades. After entering the dark tunnel and activating his flame ability, he senses a powerful energy ahead. Suddenly, a portal opens, revealing 2 crossed swords that belong to the martial arts masters of the Blade Mountain, ranked as 3rd-degree human. These monsters, known as Master Swordsmen, move as if they were a single body. Unless they are defeated simultaneously, they will regenerate immediately. Gangram hides behind a wall after recognizing these martial arts masters of the Blade Mountain, because seeing them in person definitely feels more intimidating. The protagonist is trembling with fear, but thinks he can defeat them if he just sticks to his plan. One of the masters spots Gangram and immediately attacks. The protagonist quickly starts executing his plan, grabbing a nearby torch and striking the creature in the face, setting its head ablaze. The protagonist starts running and admits to himself that he hadn't expected the monsters to find him first, but he's not panicking, as he now has their attention. While running, Gangram notices that since these creatures have the gold attribute, his fire attacks seem to be effective. However, just as he considers buying some time, he sees the second master slicing off the head of its partner. As the monster's head rolls on the ground, a message appears. Unless the masters are defeated simultaneously, the monsters will regenerate immediately. The protagonist hadn't expected that they would kill each other to heal their wounds. Sprinting quickly, Gangram realizes that a direct fight would be pointless, so he uses his achievement points to increase his agility to level 7. Even though he injures himself on the blades protruding from the walls, he doesn't stop running, as he's almost at his goal. But in a moment of distraction, he slips on a bone fragment and falls, drawing the monster's attention. Seeing that both masters are closing in, he uses his flame ability to cut the ropes holding a guillotine, which drops and severs the head of one of the monsters. However, a message soon appears indicating that the elder martial arts master of the Blade Mountain is regenerating. Meanwhile, the other monster continues to chase Gangrym, who is now in a tunnel where he can hear the wind. After entering a new chamber, the younger master follows him and falls into another trap. But since the elder master has already recovered, a message appears stating that the younger master is starting to regenerate. When the blue monster enters the room, it loses sight of where the protagonist is hiding. Gangrym increases his strength to level 7, sweeps the master's leg, and swiftly pushes it into a pit of blades. A message appears confirming that the protagonist has defeated the 3rd-degree human rank martial arts masters of the Blade Mountain, and now his achievements are being calculated. Gangrym sits on the ground to rest and receives a notification that he will be awarded extra rewards for defeating a stronger opponent. The protagonist knows that once he enters the boss room, he will complete the stage, but before doing so, he wants to confirm something, whether he is capable of stealing the fate of a monster that takes human form. So, Gangrym activates his fate-stealing ability. A message appears, indicating that there are currently 2 dead entities in the area. The protagonist is pleased to learn that he can steal the fate of a human-rank monster. He recalls that in his previous life, the reason he didn't use the Fate Thief ability before meeting Beck wasn't because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't. Every time he tried, the ability was cancelled due to a lack of mana. In his past, it took him over 3 hours to attempt using the ability on one of his fallen comrades, and with the restriction that consumes more mana the longer the target has been dead, it was nearly impossible with his insect rank magic levels. Unless the target died right in front of him, Gangrym couldn't activate his ability. That's when he began wondering if he could steal the fate of a human rank monster. But due to his inability to withstand the energy from the higher demon realm, he never had the chance to try. But now, after attempting it following his defeat of the martial masters, Gangrym managed to steal part of the strength from one of his targets, and also acquired the Unsheathing skill. The Unsheathing skill, classified as 3rd-degree demon rank, is a skill that automatically activates when a sword is drawn. When a sword is wielded as a weapon, the user's swordsmanship is automatically set to at least 3rd-degree demon rank. The protagonist decides to test his new skill, and after performing a few strikes, he notices that the sword feels significantly lighter. A warning message appears, indicating that Gangrym has gained a substantial amount of karma. Even though it was concerning, the protagonist figured everything was fine since, compared to stealing the fate of people, the amount of karma he gained by stealing from monsters should be minimal. Besides, the results were worth it. Humans who accumulate too much karma cross the edge and are called the miserable by others. Standing at the door leading to the stage's conclusion, Gangrym wonders just how close he was to that edge. The first door of the Mountain of Inferno Blade stage was completed for the first time by the participant, Gangrym. People were stunned when they saw the completion message. Shin started wondering how the protagonist managed to accomplish that alone. Gangrym noticed Go-jun approaching him, saying he knew Gangrym would pull it off, which is why they were allies. The protagonist dodged him, replying that he was nobody's ally and that no one should trust even him. Anavi then approached, congratulating Gangrym for being the first to complete the stage and asking if he had a moment to chat. After their conversation, the protagonist was in his private room at the training facility. Gangrym opened his reward box for clearing the first stage, which was given to him by Anavi. The protagonist received an inventory bag. This item allows him to store objects regardless of weight or volume. Since it was a rare inventory item, Gangrym immediately equipped it, knowing he couldn't miss out on such an opportunity. He was trying not to draw too much attention from the protection agency, despite being the best in the first stage. He also received the Wi-Fi password to use on his phone. After accessing the internet, he found news about an earthquake that hit the country, but noticed no one was talking about the protection agency until he stumbled upon a video. Opening it, he saw an announcement from the Destiny Protection Agency, led by team leader Seo-moon. The woman stated that, in order to protect all non-awakened individuals, the agency was doing its best. Gangrym tried using his fate detection ability, but got a message saying that the current fate was protected. He realized then that the agency members were using items to shield themselves. Seo-moon continued, saying that even though more incidents like that one might occur, there was no need to worry because they, the Destiny Protection Agency, would protect everyone's future and that people should trust them. After watching the video, the protagonist wondered why they were so adamant about people believing in them. The Destiny Protection Agency only recruited the best among the awakened. All its members were known for hiding their faces behind masks. Gangram snapped back to reality and thought that if that woman was indeed a member of the agency, it would make sense that no one knew how truly powerful she was. He couldn't confirm it yet, but he suspected that Beck might be involved with the association. Meanwhile, during a meeting at the agency, Gong threw a book onto the table, asking how everyone was handling things. He was the second team leader of the protection agency, visibly irritated because his subordinate had claimed that the newcomers would take at least a week to complete the stage, yet the protagonist had cleared it in a single day, including the secret area. Gong was even more enraged upon learning that the novice's fate rank and abilities were at the tertiary insect level. Furious, he announced that Sungtae would take responsibility for this. He was to write a report and clear the trap Gangram had exploited, while the rest were instructed to prepare to clean up the remaining monsters. Everyone donned their masks and left to carry out their duties. The only one left behind was Sungtae, who was tense about bearing the responsibility. While drafting the report, he found it unbelievable that Gangram had managed to lure the monster into a trap, and if Gangram were to complete the second trial in a single day again, Sungtae couldn't imagine the consequences if the higher-ups discovered that the person who cleared the stage was merely of the insect rank. Meanwhile, in the cafeteria on the first floor of the training area, the mascots were busy cleaning up. Gojun was chatting with the protagonist about the bet they had made. The lunatic writer tells Gangram that he's going to clear the second room first, since Gangram doubted his abilities. While eating, the protagonist calmly replies that he'll go at his own pace, so Gojun can do whatever he wants, and since they're not allies, he's free to leave him alone. Gojun, however, insists that he won't leave, saying he wants to get closer to Gangram. Meanwhile, Gangram notices two girls talking about how they survived thanks to Shin. She denies it, saying it was because they managed to block the attack themselves, and that next time they'll be able to clear it. The protagonist observes that Shin is doing well. Suddenly, Gojun blurts out that he hates characters who are too nice. That's the last straw for Gangram, who throws a biscuit at the lunatic, telling him to get lost. At that moment, a man sits down with Shin and her friends. Gangram notices they are talking about the girl's hands. When he turns to look, he recognizes Gunam, clearly trying to draw attention again. Gangram thinks about how he has to deal with this all over again. Gunam keeps telling the girls that their hands are small and that he's also good at palm reading. One of the girls mentions that he read her mother's palm and was quite accurate. Shin starts to feel uncomfortable, but Gunam still asks if she would like him to read her palm. She declines politely. The boy insists, saying it's not an opportunity that comes often, and tries to grab her hand. She quickly pulls her arm back, repeating that she's fine. Gangram approaches the table, drawing everyone's gaze, including Gunam's, who isn't pleased but pretends otherwise. He asks the protagonist if he'd like his palm read. Gangram flatly says no and tells Shin that he needs to speak with her in private, asking if she could accompany him. The girl agrees, and they start walking together, with Gangram suggesting they find an empty spot to talk. As they head to a quieter area, two boys come down the stairs and thank Gangram for letting them use the Wi-Fi. Since attempting to clear the mountain of Inferno blades alone and sharing the Wi-Fi, one of the rewards he received, everyone seemed friendlier toward him. However, Gangram finds this sudden friendliness strange because, in his previous life, people began to avoid him and even reject him at some point. People would say that if Gangram was somewhere, they wouldn't go there, and even though his friends tried to protect him, he thought it best to leave. Even in situations where he was alone on missions, Gunam would treat him with indifference, making excuses like, "If there was space in my team, I'd let you join." So, despite knowing Gunam's abilities, Gangram never imagined he would try to touch his hand to read his fate-stealing ability, and then spread rumors that he almost died when he ventured into the demon realm with the protagonist. Although people seemed concerned for Gangram, Gunam would tell them that, apparently, the protagonist had the ability to steal from the dead, and likely did so after killing his companions. This depressed Gangram to the point where he confronted the loudmouth who had promised not to reveal his ability. But when he found him, Gunam feigned ignorance, claiming Gangram had no proof that he had exposed anything. Gangram was furious back then, convinced it was Gunam who did it after using his palm reading ability, which was of tertiary spectral Garu class, allowing him to compare his palm with someone else's to check their fate window. The protagonist shares this information about Gunam's ability with Shin, warning her to keep her distance and to never show her palm or touch his. The girl now understands the reason behind the palm reader's persistence. Gangram says he just wanted to inform her, and now he's leaving. but Shin stops him, saying that she also cleared the Mountain of Inferno Blades door last time and asks if he wants to tackle the second door with her. Gangrim replies that it would be difficult if they were together. Confused, the girl asks why he's saying that. The protagonist tells her that she lacks experience. Shin is taken aback and says she didn't think she was that weak. Gangrim explains to her that her abilities will be weakened in the next door since the upcoming attribute is fire. Her golden key would disrupt Shin's fate, and she would need the water attribute instead. He adds that she already knows what he's talking about. After a moment of reflection, Shin admits that the second door will definitely put her at a disadvantage. As Gangrim opens the door to his room, he asks if she understands now. Shin replies that she does to some extent. Then she touches his shoulder, thanking him for the advice. Quickly, the protagonist steps into his room, closes the door, and begins to wonder why, even after what he said, Shin still treats him so kindly. Shin, on the other hand, is left puzzled by Gangrim's reaction as she stands outside. The protagonist admits to himself that he feels more comfortable alone, which is why he locked himself in his room. Shin recalls that Gangrim had turned down her offer, but continued to team up with Gojun, which led her to believe that he wanted to maintain some distance between them. However, she also thinks that since Gangrim had called her to warn her about Gunam, he could have rejected her offer with a different excuse. Watching him through the glass of the door, she wonders why he was being so honest, and guesses that perhaps he was worried about her. Sometime later, Gangrim is walking down the corridor when, out of nowhere, he is approached by Gunam, who asks if he plans to team up with Shin for the second door. The protagonist flatly says no and that he plans to go alone, then continues walking, leaving the chatterbox confused. Gangrim's goal was to get Gunam out of his way so he wouldn't drag him down, but the palm reader is persistent and suggests forming a team, claiming it would be advantageous since his class is draconian, a rather high level. Knowing that Gunam is lying, Gangrim asks him about his ability and activates his fate detection. Gunam claims he can create water bombs and weapons. The protagonist checks his information and finds that Gunam is actually of primary human class with a water attribute. Gangrim then agrees, saying they can team up and leave right away. Smiling, the palm reader says he will prepare in his room and quickly heads downstairs. The protagonist thinks it's a relief that the chatterbox approached him first, as his abilities will be valuable in this stage. The second training area, the Door of Infernal Fire, requires them to find the ice crystal and return to the lobby. There is no time limit. Soon, Gangrim and Gunam enter the Door of Infernal Fire. Gunam expresses surprise that Gangrim accepted his offer so easily, suspecting it's because of his water attribute. Without responding, they continue walking. Gunam asks if Gangrim has seen the conditions for completion and if there's ice in this place. For now, Gangrim remains silent, but draws his sword behind the chatterbox, while Gunam, manipulating water, remarks on how hot it is in this place, but notes that he still hasn't seen any demons. The protagonist responds that they'll encounter them soon and swiftly strikes with his sword, leaving Gunam startled. Gangrim activates his unsheathing ability and slices through a creature without hesitation. He comments that he didn't expect to see monsters so early, but now they're starting to appear. A group of fire toads, classified as tertiary insect rank, begins to approach. These monsters are born in the hottest springs. Although their attacks are weak, they move in swarms and attack creatures cooler than themselves. Gunam opens his water bottle, confidently stating that toads are a piece of cake, and proceeds to shoot multiple jets of water, easily taking down the group of creatures. The self-proclaimed Aquaman celebrates his success, boasting that his powers work excellently here. He then tells the protagonist that it will be easy, as long as they quickly find the ice crystal. Gangrim responds affirmatively, noticing that his partner was busy searching. He pondered what to do with him since he wasn't in a rush to find the crystal, already knowing its location. Gunam, seeing the protagonist smiling, assumed that Gangrim was thinking it had been a good decision to team up with him. However, more monsters soon began to appear, and now Gangrim had to fight them alone because Gunam was suffering from mana depletion, given the significantly higher number of monsters here compared to the Mountain of Inferno Blades. Struggling, Gunam realizes he has no choice but to fight with a sword like Gangrim. The self-proclaimed Aquaman tries to fight, but he is soon overwhelmed by a fire toad that retaliates after being struck by the sword, sending him flying and then leaping onto him. Gunam starts screaming desperately for help, feeling the intense heat with the creature on top of him. Seeing that his partner was unable to free himself, Gangrim takes a deep breath and goes to assist him. After slaying the toad, Gangrim tells Gunam that if he can't keep up, he should turn back because he could finish the mission alone. Gunam insists that he'll be fine if he can rest a bit, but internally, he thinks the protagonist is incredibly arrogant, full of himself for being the first to clear the initial door. Gunam had teamed up with Gangrim to uncover his class and abilities, but he couldn't verify them since the protagonist's hands were bandaged. Even if he tried to guess his abilities, it seemed Gangrim was hiding something. Nonetheless, Gunam was determined to read his palm the moment Gangrim let his guard down. He was just waiting for the right opportunity. Unaware, Gunam ends up sitting on top of a hidden monster. As it awakens and rises, he falls to the ground, fully exposed and about to be attacked. But the protagonist swiftly steps in and slays the giant crab with a single strike. Gunam hadn't anticipated other monsters besides the fire toads, which is why he had let his guard down. Gangrim tells him that he's saved him twice now, and that the crab was annoying to kill, so they should move on before more creatures appear. Gunam, incredulous that Gangrim was boasting for helping a bit, grows increasingly irritated, and decides that as soon as his mana is restored, he'll take on the protagonist with ease. Gangrim turns around and asks Gunam if he has something to say. Flustered, the Aquaman forces a smile and thanks him for the help. After walking for a while, they reach the spot where the crystal is located. The protagonist spots the item he needs and thinks that all that's left is to bring it back to the lobby to clear this stage. Gunam gets excited upon seeing the ice crystal, but quickly realizes that since there was only one, the people at the training center would assume he succeeded because of Gangrim. Not wanting to miss his chance, Gunam starts sprinting wildly toward the crystal, knowing that whoever grabs it first will complete the stage and receive rewards, honor, respect, and admiring looks. Ambitious, Gunam rushes toward the crystal, already envisioning his triumph, but when he grabs it, he finds it to be soft. It turns out to be the egg sac of a tertiary insect rank fire toad, containing countless fire toad eggs. Where there are eggs, fire toads are always nearby. Suddenly, a lake of fire emerges around the egg sac, and the toads begin attacking Gunam, dragging him into the fiery lake. Gangrim remarks that it's karma for trying to stab him in the back. The chatterbox screams for help, but Gangrim turns his back on him, leaving him to be devoured by the creatures. Meanwhile, deeper within the infernal fire room, the protagonist reaches the crystal cave and easily acquires the ice crystal, which is of tertiary phantom rank. A crystal made of ice with a water attribute that will enhance his abilities while in possession of it. Gangrim opens the shop window. The condition to access the shop is to obtain a spiritual pearl. Originally, the protagonist wouldn't have known about the existence of the spiritual pearl shop, but this time, he manages to access it since he had already collected spiritual pearls beforehand. Gangrim decides to purchase the prayer chest, even though he has to exchange his achievement points since he doesn't have enough money. The prayer chest had a primary phantom rank. By placing an item inside and offering a prayer, one could receive a desired item, but if the offering was insufficient, nothing would be granted. Gangrim found the item's name amusing, but understood that the chest was designed for placing a precious item as an offering. The ice crystal was a tertiary phantom rank item, and the protagonist was aiming for a primary phantom rank item. A message appeared, indicating that he was making his prayer. Although there was a slight power difference, it was still possible since both items were of phantom rank. Not long after, Gangrim received the result: insect honey of tertiary insect rank. Not entirely satisfied with what he had obtained, he decided to gather more ice crystals. Since he couldn't get the quality he desired, he thought he might at least aim for quantity. He reasoned that with all those crystals, it would be impossible not to get what he wanted eventually. Meanwhile, Gunam managed to crawl out of the lava lake. Though shaken, he was furious with the protagonist for abandoning him. Despite dragging himself along, he vowed that when he found Gangrim, he would drive his sword through him. As the chatterbox was trudging along, lost in thoughts of revenge, he noticed a crystal nearby and quickly sprinted to grab it. A message then appeared. The second door of the infernal fire room had been completed. Bursting through the door, Gunam ran joyfully, thrilled to be the first to succeed. Everyone began congratulating him, as it was an incredible feat to clear the stage in just one day. Holding the toad that had the crystal, he relished the reaction of admiration he was receiving. The palm reader believed that he had now surpassed the protagonist, until he realized that Gangrim was already there, having arrived before him. Gurren starts staring at him and asks how he could flee alone after searching for so long. The protagonist doesn't respond and keeps listening to the loudmouth's threats. A Navi then arrives in the room, calling for Gurren, who had been the first to clear the Inferno fire room. He immediately changes his demeanor, waving at the agency representative. Before leaving with the woman, Gurren extends his hand, saying he would forgive Gangrim and that a handshake would symbolize their reconciliation. Despite his fear of what might happen, the protagonist also extends his hand. Gurren activates the skill palm reading and tells Gangrim not to be afraid. The palm reader takes the opportunity to read his opponent's fate. After doing so, he leaves happily, following Anavi, feeling better after being the first to finish the room and realizing the protagonist was pathetic. Guran checks Gangrim's fate window and, upon seeing that he is a tertiary insect, rank with flame attributes, with skills like flame manipulation of tertiary insect rank and unsheathing of primary human rank, he is surprised that his opponent is of tertiary insect rank, as he had thought he was at least human rank. This frustrates him because he went through all that trouble for a low-ranked opponent. Gangrim, seeing Guran's reaction, is pleased that his plan worked and is glad he managed to acquire the item he was using. It was a primary ghost rank fate protection amulet that shields parts of the fate window from being read by others. The protagonist recalls that he couldn't prepare many frogs because there weren't many ice crystals left after obtaining the amulet, but it seems the loudmouth found one of the crystals inside a frog. Gojun overhears Guran's conversation with Anavi and, observing the situation, begins to wonder how he managed to clear the room in just one day when even the protagonist returned in terrible condition. So, noticing that Guran had finished his conversation, he calls out and praises him, saying he is amazing. The palm reader immediately recognizes Gojun and remembers that his rank is tertiary god, so he approaches them. The writer says he tried to clear the second room several times but always failed, and that Gangrim seemed weaker than he thought. Guran agrees, saying that the protagonist was indeed tertiary insect rank and obviously weak. After all, he even fled because of a monster horde. At that moment, Gojun tells Guran that he is more of a protagonist than Gangrim. The palm reader begins bragging, saying he's not wrong. At that moment, a message appears for Gangrim that the fates of Gojun and Gunam are intertwining, so he gets up, thinking the writer will stop paying attention to him for a while. While the two loudmouths chat, a message appears, stating that it's the worst fate combination, and that dark energy is corrupting Gunam's destiny. The protagonist, seeing this, imagines that Gojun will now take care of the palm reader, and that things are going better than he planned. In the emergency meeting room, Soul's Team 2 is gathered. Gong asks Anavi if Gunam is ghost rank. The woman denies it, saying he is human rank. The team leader then asks if the palm reader went to room 2 alone. Anavi replies that the rookie was partnering with Gangrim. Sungtae, upon hearing the protagonist's name, can't believe he's causing trouble again. Gong starts to wonder how they went together, and only Gunam cleared the room. The leader begins to suspect something strange. Anavi mentions that Gunam said something odd to her. The rookie claimed that while killing flame frogs, he discovered one had swallowed an ice crystal. Hearing this, Gong says that monsters shouldn't be able to approach the crystal cave since barriers had been set up. Anavi confirms that she checked and found the barriers had fallen, and the monsters devoured all the ice crystals. Gong becomes furious and reprimands Sungtae for doing a terrible job. The Chacha is startled by the scolding and insists he checked everything multiple times, convinced there were no issues. He argues that the fact they cleared the area faster than expected meant they had more capable trainees. Gong slams his fist on the table and asks Sungtae if he can take responsibility for his claims. The second leader of the association intimidates his subordinate, questioning if he can truly guarantee that his plan had no flaws and that, with so many talented trainees, they were already ready for the third room. He demands to know if Sungtae would take responsibility if all of them died. Gong explains that, starting from the third gate, they would enter the true demonic realm, and all the trainees would die if they went in unprepared. Therefore, all the Chachas needed to ensure the rookies became even better. The leader instructs them to keep a close eye on Gangrim, as he wasn't expecting this outcome. The protagonist approaches the third gate, where a notice indicates that the opening date has been postponed indefinitely, and that a notification will be sent once more details are decided. This notice was issued by Soul's Destiny Protection Agency, Team 2. A few days later, while Gangrim is getting his meal, he overhears two young men conversing. One asks his companion if he's sure about the raid method Gunam mentioned, or if perhaps they were deceived. Goku admits that the whole thing still seems strange to him, as none of the others who completed that room had any connection to Gunam. His partner disagrees, arguing that the palm reader wouldn't gain any advantage from it. Lee thinks it over and says it makes sense since Gojun and Gangrim finished well after Gunam, despite being on the same team in the past. Goku points out that the two no longer work together. Lee then suggests to his companion that it's better if they just explore the place. Listening to their conversation, Gangrim now realizes that Gunam has been spreading false information and that Gojun has already abandoned him. Soon after, a message appears stating that it is a summoning notification, instructing everyone to gather in the hall at 6 p.m. The notice was given by Chacha Anavi. Upon arriving at the designated time, Anavi greets everyone and explains that she has gathered them to talk about the third portal. Removing the seals, Anavi announces that, From that point on, the association is allowing entry into the third portal. The trainees cheer upon hearing this. She explains that beyond the third portal, they will be entering the demonic realm, rather than just the training fields the protection agency had prepared. From that moment onward, everyone would be moving together, as the real environment of the demonic world is far harsher, with a wide variety of new monsters awaiting them. Anavi clarifies that the gods will be watching them while they are in the demonic realm. She advises them not to respond immediately if they hear a god's voice and instructs them to review the updated guide. The trainees are impressed with the guide's changes. Anavi mentions that they have added many new strategies for handling situations in the demonic world and strongly recommends everyone read it before entering the portal. After explaining everything, the representative concludes by urging everyone with a heartfelt plea not to die. Some of the rookies begin trembling with fear after hearing Anavi's warning about not dying. Other trainees consider forming the largest groups possible, given that there are no team limits, but they decide to read the guide first. As Gangram contemplates his next move, a girl approaches him, poking him to get his attention. Bomb and her smiling sister start chatting with the protagonist. She asks if he can tell them apart. Jewel remarks that other people always confuse the two of them. Gangram never imagined that those two, Shin, the only ones who spoke to him when Gunam spread rumors about him in his past life, were talking to him again. The protagonist knows that, besides being twins, their fates were also intertwined. Bomb tells her sister that people would confuse them if she didn't change her hairstyle. Gyul insists that she won't change her hair. Gangram activates his fate detection ability and first identifies Bomb, who belongs to the first-degree Draconian class, with a gold attribute. Her skill is perfect aim of the primary ghost class. When using weapons or long-range abilities, she always hits the target, but the mana consumption varies according to the distance and the target's class. Next, the protagonist checks Gyul's fate window. She too is of the first-degree Draconian class, with a gold attribute, and has the same skill as her sister, perfect aim. Gangram realizes that nothing has changed, and recalls that, in his past life, Bomb survived while Gyul died in the third room. A message appears for the protagonist, indicating that he senses the spirit of death from the white tiger surrounding Gyul, and that there will be a life-threatening danger in the coming days. Gangram invites the girl to go to the third room together. Gyul accepts, saying she didn't want to go with her sister anyway. However, the protagonist also invites Bomb to join them. Gangram wants to ensure that both sisters survive this time. They head to the third training room, the Ice Hall. The completion conditions require them to hunt more than one of each type of monster in the Ice Valley. There are 10 types of monsters to eliminate, with a time limit of 14 days. Once the protagonist enters the room with the sisters, a message appears, stating that the current demonic realm is filled with aquatic energy, which overwhelms Gangram's fate. This results in a 10% reduction in his stats. In the Ice Hall, the protagonist immediately begins searching for monsters to finish as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, the girls are looking at the mission objectives, but Bomb struggles to see anything due to the wind. Her sister clarifies that monster hunting is the goal they must achieve. Before long, they manage to kill a group of horned rabbits of the first-degree insectoid class. While resting, they search through the shop for items to buy. Bomb remarks that there are many items available, but it's difficult to navigate since there's no search bar. Jewel, noticing that the protagonist managed to find several items, asks him how he does it so easily. Gangram explains that it's similar to a game he used to play. Jewel asks the protagonist to take a look at her weapons, mentioning that she was thinking about buying a bow and arrows. After selecting their weapons, with the tips Gangram had given them, they were now fully equipped. Following that, they resumed their hunt. The protagonist was killing creatures using all his techniques and abilities. After defeating a group of monsters, he notices the sisters playfully teasing each other over who had killed more. Bomb was an excellent markswoman, while Jewel was an archer on the national team. This made their hunting efficiency skyrocket now that they were using the appropriate weapons. Gangram recalls that in his past life, Bomb became a high-ranking sniper. The protagonist reflects that Jewel would have ended up like Bomb if she hadn't died. He remembers that in his past life, Bomb became a completely different person after her sister's death. Bomb never smiled again after that, and, to avenge her sister's death, specialized in monster hunting. Afterward, she quickly grew stronger and was contacted by the Sura sect, one of the 5 great sects, but she was never truly happy again. Gangram knows that the sisters have good fortunes and can become stronger even without facing many difficulties. The protagonist is determined to save Jewel for Bomb's sake, and once he succeeds, he plans to introduce them to Shin so they can join the Flying Tiger sect. If his plan works, Gangram might even be able to save the members of the Flying Tiger sect who were killed by Bomb, when she became the sharpshooter for the aquatic fruit sect. Now, he must stay vigilant not to lose sight of Jewel, but when he goes to check, he realizes he has already lost sight of her, only spotting her exhausted sister nearby. Gangram, along with Bomb, starts running in search of Jewel, looking everywhere. Bomb, even knowing her sister had gone to relieve herself, never imagined she would go so far. The protagonist claims to have heard screams and starts running in the direction they came from, despite Bomb saying she heard nothing. Gangram insists that he definitely heard something. Soon, they reach a spot with a large hole and hear Jewel's voice shouting that she's down there. Bomb approaches and sees her sister with Gunam, then tells Jewel that she will help her. The protagonist quickly jumps into the hole and asks the girl if she is okay. The archer responds that she's fine, but the guy with her doesn't seem to be. Gangram realizes that the man is Gunam, who, upon noticing the protagonist's arrival, becomes nervous since he knows he can no longer ask for help. Gangram asks the loudmouth if he needs assistance, but Gunam yells that he doesn't need help from anyone. The protagonist tells the girl that they should leave quickly. Gyul questions if they are really going to leave that man behind, as he claimed that his legs were paralyzed due to an attack from a dangerous monster. Upon hearing that Gunam was suffering from a paralyzing poison, Gangram deduces that he must have been attacked by rabbits, and assures her that the effect will wear off soon. Jewel is surprised and wonders how someone could be attacked by rabbits, which are weak monsters. Meanwhile, Gunam, writhing in pain and listening to their conversation, grows even more furious with the protagonist, pounding the ground and declaring that he needs to make Gangram pay. A divine voice agrees with Gunam, saying that bad guys must pay for their deeds, and asks if he wants help. The palm reader looks up, bewildered, and asks who it is. Meanwhile, Gangram tells the sisters that they should head back now, because the difficulty will increase after nightfall. Bomb says that she has just increased her stats to get stronger, and doesn't want to go back. Her sister says the same to the protagonist, who tells them there's no need to rush since this is only the first day. Bomb asks Gangram if he will come back to hunt with them again. The protagonist assures her he will, until they clear the hall. Gyul celebrates, glad that they will have his help. Suddenly, Gangram hears screams not far away and recognizes the voice. He starts running in that direction, telling the girls to go ahead without him, as he just remembered something but will return soon. Shin and her group are surrounded by a large pack of wolves. With no way out, the leader tries to keep everyone calm, but soon realizes that, as the wolves begin attacking, one of her companion's swords breaks. Without hesitation, she activates her skill, Tree Leaf Method, swiftly killing the wolves that had already lunged at them. Shin instructs everyone to stay behind her, and uses the Tree Leaf Method to shield her group. Now fighting alone against the wolves, she thinks she needs to kill as many as possible to make things easier later. However, she fails to notice a creature sneaking up behind her and ends up getting attacked. Despite being injured, Shin refuses to give up and thinks that just one more capable fighter would make all the difference. Gangram arrives and applies the conquest status Flame Manipulation to his sword, enhancing the skill to the 2nd degree insectoid level. The protagonist strikes the wolf biting Shin and quickly begins attacking the other nearby monsters until the girl realizes it's Gangram who is helping her. She joins him in taking down the remaining wolves, and before long, they manage to kill them all. Shin thanks the protagonist, acknowledging that his help made it easier. Gangram doesn't respond to her at that moment, but once they return to the hall, he questions why she didn't flee. He admonishes the group, stating that they should have realized the situation was against them, and then directs his words at Shin, insisting that she should always run if she cannot win, as it's far better to flee than to get injured. The girl retorts that Gangram keeps calling her weak, but it's actually the opposite. The protagonist counters, saying she was simply lucky, and questions what she would have done if the monsters had some hidden ability she wasn't aware of and no one came to help. Gangram doesn't want a senseless death like the one Shin suffered in his past life to happen again. The protagonist, angry, asks the girl if she plans to die trying to save others, emphasizing that helping the weak is something only the strong can do, and she shouldn't forget that. He then turns his back and leaves her with her group. Sasori approaches Shin, remarking that Gangram was a bit harsh on her. Meanwhile, Hinata asks if the protagonist had actually suggested she run away and abandon them. Shin starts smiling and says that Gangram was just worried, and in the end, he saved the entire group. She still doesn't understand why the protagonist keeps up the act of being a bad guy when, in reality, he's incredibly kind. Shin calls out to Gangram, and even with his back turned, she thanks him for taking care of her. The protagonist takes a deep breath and, to stay true to his decision, replies indifferently, "Whatever." Gujun was the first to clear the 3rd portal, the ice hall. Shortly after, Gangram also finishes, leaving only the sisters to complete it. Jewel is astonished to see that someone has already cleared that hall. Her sister is equally impressed by how quickly it was done. They ask the protagonist if he plans to leave now. Gangrym replies that he will stay until they finish, thinking that since no one would return after completing it, he might as well stick around. The protagonist is aiming for the secret reward that comes with hunting the 11th monster. While Bomb and Jewel bicker over stolen monsters, Gangrym grows concerned since the mission was completed much faster than in his past life. He activates the fate detection skill, but a message indicates that the death aura of the white tiger is nearby. The protagonist starts to wonder if there's someone else besides Jewel who ends up dying. He then recalls the message he received during the conversation between Gunam and Gujun. He begins to think that it would be troublesome to get involved with the palm reader again, and that it might be better to just kill him now. Gangrym tells the sisters that he's heading to the nearby hill and will be back shortly, advising them to continue hunting but to stay together and not hunt alone. He assumes the sisters will be fine as long as they stick together. While walking, he encounters Gunam, who says they finally meet because he's been looking for him. Gangrym asks why he's saying that. Using his water manipulation skill, Gunam begins to form an ice stake and says he intends to pay him back for the humiliation he suffered last time. The protagonist prepares for battle and taunts Gunam, asking if he really thinks he can take him down, suspecting that the lunatic indeed intends to kill him. With a crazed look, Gunam pours more energy into his skill, claiming that he can, because he is the main character and can hear the voice of God. He finishes forming the ice stake and, declaring that this is the power of a god, launches his attack. As Gangrym defends against the assault, he recalls Anavi's words that the gods would be watching them while they are in the demonic realm. He starts to deduce that perhaps a god has possessed Gunam. The protagonist activates his fate detection skill and notices that Gunam's status has changed to primary grade humanoid class, linked to a god called the Little Plague Guest. Gunam, attacking wildly, raves that he is the protagonist and that it's obvious he was chosen by a god. Those who ally themselves with the Little Plague Guest and allow themselves to be possessed are called shamans, gaining immense power through possession. Gangrym realizes that Gunam's mana has increased significantly and that he's also gained a new skill. The infection skill of the primary grade humanoid class borrows the power of a god to infect opponents upon striking them. While the skill is active, the impacted area becomes infected. Gangrym finds this ability troublesome, knowing that he will be infected if touched. He decides it's best to make Gunam exhaust all his mana first. To do so, he starts setting the surrounding trees on fire while dodging the attacks. Gunam taunts him, saying there's nowhere to run and that divine punishment will hunt him down to the very end. As Gangrym set the trees ablaze, creatures began to flee, and a group of poros rushed past Gunam. Despite using his ice stakes, he couldn't hit the protagonist, who was now even farther away. Enraged, Gunam killed a few of the boar-like creatures, but in his fury, he failed to notice a giant monster approaching. Suddenly, he was attacked, severely injured, and thrown to the ground as the monster retreated. A god's voice echoed, saying it was there to watch because it heard there was a human possessed by a god, but it realized that he was weak, befitting a low-ranking god. Gunam grew increasingly infuriated, realizing that this wasn't Chilwan, and noticed there were other gods watching as well. The god remarked that it was still fascinating to observe, even if the human was weak. Struggling on the ground, Gunam retorted to the superior being, asking if it found this amusing. But it was Gangrym who answered instead, plunging his sword into Gunam's back. The god remarked that the human had now lost. The demigod began desperately calling for Master Cheolwan to save him, but as Gangrym started to pull out his sword, he asked if this was the revenge Gunam had planned. Without waiting for a response, Gangrym told him that he had been a nuisance for some time and that he knew the risks involved. Just as he was about to finish off his opponent, he noticed Bomb running toward him, crying out for help. Gangrym placed his sword beside Gunam's head, telling him he was lucky. Next time he would definitely kill him, but for now, he should pull himself together. The protagonist then turned his attention to Bomb, who, in tears, explained that snowboars had suddenly appeared and dragged Jewel away, and now she had disappeared. Immediately, Gangrym recalled what the mage had told him in his childhood, that he had terrible luck, and that his fortune was filled with death. He also remembered how, in his past life, people used to say that many members of his team would return injured. Bomb was in a panic, noticing that Gangrym seemed shaken after hearing about her sister. He thought that the only people he hadn't caused to die were his parents, but wherever he went, death followed. To him, it was all his fault. He believed he would never be able to save lives, and that his life was plagued by misfortune. Returning to the present, he reassured Bomb, telling her he would find Jewel. The protagonist started walking quickly, with Bomb running after him, pleading for him to wait. Gangrym told her to return to the lobby first. Bomb, crying, clutched his arm, insisting he come with her, but he asked her what would happen if something also happened to her. With tears streaming down her face, the girl reminded him that he had been the one who told them to stay together. And now, how could she go back alone, knowing her sister was in danger? Gangrim tried to comfort her, telling her it would be okay, but if it got dark or too dangerous, she should leave. Reluctantly, she agreed. And so, they began their search. Gangrim didn't know exactly how Jewel had died in his past life, but now that she was in danger, he thought this might have been the cause. After some time searching, Bomb noted that there were no monsters around, but Gangrim pressed on, knowing that low-level creatures would never dare to enter the territory of a predator. Suddenly, they heard a noise. Gangrim quickly grabbed Bomb's arm and pulled her behind a rock to hide. They had entered the territory of a Yeti, which was currently seizing a snow boar. The Yeti, a third-degree spiritual class monster resembling a fur-covered humanoid, only appeared on snowy days and had an overwhelming desire to fight opponents. Gangrim noticed that Jewel was with the monster. In a moment of distraction, Bomb tried to escape. Desperate to save her sister, she pointed her weapon at the Yeti, ready to kill it. But when the monster looked in her direction, it couldn't see anyone. Gangrim had managed to grab Bomb and pull her behind the rock in time. The protagonist couldn't believe what he was seeing, so he activated his Fate Theft ability to confirm if Jewel was still alive. A message appeared, indicating that there were 0 deaths in the area. The protagonist takes a deep breath and tells Bomb that if they fight now, Jewel will be in even greater danger. But he soon realizes that the Yeti is taking the girl to its nest, so he says they should wait for the right moment. Bomb asks if they will attack the monster when the time comes. Gangrim responds that they shouldn't. He thinks it's better to avoid fighting it altogether. They watch as the monster reaches its nest. Gangrim hands Bomb a flare and tells her that once Jewel is on the ground, she should fire it to lure the Yeti away, and then immediately run to the entrance of the demonic realm. He instructs Bomb not to fight, only to run, then asks if she's capable of doing that. The girl confirms that she can. Gangrim plans to use that moment to rescue Jewel. As the protagonist positions himself, he considers that Bomb is fast enough to outrun a Yeti and is in a better spot. Using an item to enhance her long-distance vision, Bomb notices when the monster sets her sister down and fires the flare, catching the Yeti's attention. The bright light infuriates the monster, and it immediately charges toward the light. Gangrim, hidden behind some rocks, waits for the perfect moment. Once the Yeti leaves its nest, he sprints to rescue Jewel, who is severely weakened. He shouts for her to wake up, but there's no response. Picking her up, he realizes she's unconscious, but he knows he can't administer any medicine at the moment. As he carries her on his back, he resolves to get her back to the hall as quickly as possible. However, when he looks ahead, he finds the Yeti returning. Gangrim realizes he has no other chance but this one. The enraged monster throws aside the boar it had been carrying and charges at him. The protagonist activates his flame ability, lamenting his rotten luck. Using the flames on his feet, Gangrim slides under the Yeti, dodging its attack. But he quickly notices there are actually 2 monsters, with the second one closing in. Gangrim finds himself trapped between the 2, waiting for the right moment to react. The Yetis are coming at him from either side, ready to strike. When they get close again, he slides to evade and starts running to try to escape. Returning to the nest, Gangrim sets the kindling on fire, lays Jewel down, and tells her to hold on as he plans to kill the 2 creatures. The Yetis charge at him, and Gangrim notices from their footsteps that there might be a weak spot in the ground. He quickly devises a plan. Using flames on his feet once more, he boosts his agility to level 18 and starts running around the Yetis, causing them to strike the ground as he passes. This tactic begins to fracture the ground. Thanks to his increased agility, Gangrim easily dodges their attacks and, using his sword, draws the monster's attention, making one Yeti hit the other as he leaps away. With the combined weight of the monsters and the fractures in the ground, the surface collapses, sending one of the Yetis tumbling into a hole. A message appears, indicating that Gangrim has defeated a 3rd-rank demon-class Yeti. Gangrim feels relieved that his plan worked, knowing that in the demonic realm, many terrains are made solely of snow and ice and tend to collapse easily, just like the area where Jewel had fallen. The other Yeti is still hanging on, trying not to fall. Gangrim decides to act quickly, determined not to let the creature climb back up. But before he can do anything, the Yeti punches the ground, causing it to fully collapse, and both it and the protagonist plunge into the hole. As he falls, Gangrim thinks that this might be the end for him. However, before he hits the ground, he is caught by roots created using Shin's skill. Looking up, he sees the girl who tells him that if he lets his guard down, he might end up leaving here as a dead man. Thankfully, she didn't arrive too late. Gangnam smiles and thanks Shin for saving him, but the girl tells him to thank Bam, who came looking for her. The protagonist says he's going to descend to the bottom of that hole to check a few things before leaving. After a while, he comes back up to find Bam trying to wake Jewel. Gangnam sees that the girl isn't responding and starts to think it might be too late, the thought creeping into his mind that one can't fight the fate they are born with. But suddenly, Shin perks up as Jewel wakes up, asking her sister if it's cold and whether she could turn on the heater. Bam can't believe her sister is alive, but quickly rejoices along with Shin over this unexpected miracle. Gangnam is astonished, having believed all hope was lost. A message appears indicating that the death aura of the white tiger has dissipated from Jewel and that a predetermined fate has now been altered. A change in fate begins. Gangnam's class has been promoted from tertiary insect rank to secondary insect rank. Now, the protagonist, in addition to being a secondary insect rank with flame attributes, has upgraded skills: fate detection at tertiary dragon rank, fate sealing at primary dragon rank, flame manipulation at secondary insect rank, and unsheathing at tertiary demon rank. Gangnam is stunned to see that his fate rank has changed, something he thought was impossible. Bam runs to him, hugging him tightly, and tearfully thanks him, saying that her sister is alive because of him. He decides to leave the complicated details for later since, for now, Jewel is recovering after taking a pill Shin gave her. Smiling, Gangnam knows that the most important thing right now is that everyone is safe. Meanwhile, Gunam is still suffering in his misery. Cheolwan asks if he's all right, and not knowing what else to do, decides to try something. The loudmouth, defeated, laments that as a god, he regrets having accepted an illness in exchange for power. Cheolwan tells Gunam that he's gone too far, and leaves him talking to himself, trapped in that hole, too exhausted to call for help. Suddenly, Gojun appears, and Gunam starts pleading for assistance, claiming that Gangnam attacked him and fled. Now he's convinced that the protagonist is a villain and urges Gojun to join forces to finally kill him. Gojun responds that if Gunam were truly the protagonist, he would have no trouble getting out of there on his own, and questions how someone could lose to someone like Gangnam. The loudmouth insists that the protagonist was a coward. Seeing this, Gojun says he had thought Gunam was holding back his true powers, but now he suspects that Gunam might not be the protagonist at all. Desperate for revenge, Gunam begs the writer to help him, since he is the one telling the story. But Gojun simply replies that if Gunam were really the protagonist, he should be able to escape on his own, then turns around and starts walking away. Gunam, left with no options, begins to scream for help, admitting that he is not the protagonist. Hearing this, Gojun coldly responds that he won't assist him because he's not going to waste his efforts on a mere side character. He continues walking, leaving the palm reader trapped and cursing his situation. Gunam's desperate screams echo everywhere, growing louder, making sure they can be heard far and wide. Gangnam is fighting against a large group of demons. He is surrounded on all sides but still manages to defeat them all. After finishing, he starts cleaning his sword when Bam calls him, saying she had just defeated the monsters. She teases her sister, claiming she had done all the work while her sister only helped from behind. But soon, the protagonist notices someone approaching and tells them to duck to avoid an incoming strike from Beck. Bam starts wondering who this person is. The woman says she wants Gangnam and that if they hand him over, she will spare the others. The sisters, outraged, point their weapons at Beck. The protagonist rushes forward, shouting for them to stop, but demons appear and begin grabbing him, preventing him from reaching the girls. Gangnam yells for the sisters to stop, but soon a demon covers his mouth, leaving him only able to watch as Bam and Gyul are killed. Held by the demons, surrounded by a pool of blood, he starts hearing the girls' voices asking why he had interfered in their lives and claiming that if it weren't for him, they would have survived. Still restrained, he hears them question why he didn't save them and why they had ever taken him to the flying tiger seat. When the demons start to release Gangnam, he sees Bam by his side, saying he must not forget that it was him who killed them. The protagonist wakes up and immediately splashes water on his face, realizing it was just a nightmare. Despite being shaken by the dream, he resolves that the future won't turn out like that, and vows not to let the past repeat itself. He begins to think that getting close to the sisters and having this nightmare might have been a warning. Bam and Gyul see Gangnam as a savior, and their fates seem intertwined. Fearing something might happen, the protagonist considers that it might be better to distance himself from them. Sometime later, Bam is at his door trying to convince him to join them as a group. However, as the protagonist refuses, Bam asks if he now hates them. Gangnam says he doesn't and that he just has other things to do. Gyul mentions that Shin is also coming to join them. Upon hearing this, the protagonist thinks he won't have to worry as much now and tells the sisters it's great, because Shin seems like a good person. Still, Bom insists that Gangnam should join them, but he says maybe next time, and then shuts the door. Jewel comments that the protagonist has been distancing himself from them since the day she nearly died. Bom says he must have a reason for doing this. The sisters head down the stairs and from afar signal to Shin that Gangnam had refused to go. Bom then opens the door to the 4th training room and says they'll go by themselves since there's nothing else they can do to make Gangnam join them. The 4th training room is the Forest of Swords. The conditions to clear it are to hunt monsters and collect spiritual pearls within the forest labyrinth. They need to collect a total of 1,000 spiritual pearls. Bom and her sister are happy to be in a forest, as they find the fresh air pleasant. Soon, Shin notices something approaching and warns the sisters to be careful. Bom, the gunslinger, asks if it might be a monster coming toward them. Shin manages to fend off the attack and says it wasn't a monster. He thinks the forest itself is dangerous. The Forest of Swords training room is a demonic realm, an endless forest with no change in terrain. Reaching the end only sends you back to the other side. Many things in the forest can harm the trainees, as even the branches are like swords. The group starts reviewing the information about the room. Bom remarks that collecting 1,000 spiritual pearls will take a long time. Shin suggests they first scout the area to understand the location. Gyeol says that instead of splitting up, they should stay together this time, as Gangnam had told them. Bom insists she isn't a child to need that, but it would have been nice if the protagonist were there. Shin listens to the conversation and thinks that the protagonist might have been kind to them, which is why they missed him. However, he recalls Gangnam's harsh words and imagines that, while tough-spoken, Gangnam might be a good person deep down. Lost in thought, Shin hears Bom say there's something ahead. Turning around, the Wood Dominator warns Jewel to stop because she's about to fall into a trap. Even so, Jewel takes too long to notice and ends up falling. Meanwhile, Gangnam is in his room, examining the egg he received. As he places his finger near it, the egg opens its mouth like a monster. The protagonist realizes it's fiercer than he had heard. The unknown egg is of a defined rank and will hatch after being kept for a certain duration. The appearance of its offspring will vary based on its diet, and it's still unclear what will emerge. Gangnam received the unknown egg as a reward for defeating the Yeti, his 11th type of monster. The offspring's characteristics depend on its diet. Gangnam ties up the egg, knowing he can't feed it just anything. He's eager for it to hatch, as he already knows what he wants from it. The egg wasn't the only thing Gangnam gained. After defeating the tertiary ghost rank Yeti, the protagonist activated the ability Seal Fate, stealing the skill battle instinct and the water attribute. Gangnam, previously a secondary insect rank with the flame attribute, changed his attribute to water. This allowed water to counter fire, unlocking new potential. His reduced attributes were restored to their normal state. Gangnam remains at secondary insect rank, but now wields the water attribute. Bom and Jewel were impressed when they saw Gangnam eating, as he had purchased a lot of water attribute-tolerant food. Since he hadn't bought a decent weapon in the ice room, he decides that in the next demonic realm he'll invest in weapons, and might even change attributes again, as flames could prove useful. After some time, Gangnam enters the Forest of Swords room and hears the voices of 2 gods conversing about how dull the ice room was, and speculating whether this one might be better. They agree it likely won't be, as the participants are still novices, though they find it amusing to watch them grow stronger. Noticing the voices, Gangnam reflects on how low the level of these gods must be to speak in such a manner, and immediately deactivates communication. One of the gods remarks to the other that it seems Gangnam noticed their presence. While disconnecting, the protagonist wonders what to call these beings, perhaps minor evil spirits, or even ghosts. The entity present is impressed by Gangnam's lack of surprise. After Gangnam's attempt to disconnect the communication is denied due to insufficient spiritual power, one of the gods comments that Gangnam is brave and admits to liking him. The other asks if Gangnam is willing to be possessed. A message appears stating that the guardian of the Forest of Swords has offered possession. The protagonist thinks these might be the territorial gods of this demonic realm and decides to open the shop before responding. Territorial gods are beings that govern a specific region. With the possession of a territorial god, one can become the strongest within that realm. However, the god is bound to the region, so the connection becomes useless once outside it. This room, nicknamed the Labyrinth of the Forest of Swords, would become easier to navigate if Gangnam accepts the possession. The protagonist, using the demonic realm map item, opens it and remarks that it's all he needs to find his way. A message indicates that, by using the demonic realm map, Gangnam has explored 1% of the room. The protagonist notes that only the general borders are available for now. The demonic realm's entrance is marked on the map at Gangrim's current location, and he realizes that the more he moves, the more places will be added to the map. A message appears stating that there are multiple entrances to the demonic realm, leading the protagonist to think he might be approaching the fourth area. The trainees from the protection agency were divided into various areas, but in the more advanced rooms, when people began dying, raids were carried out by trainees from multiple areas. After walking for a while, the marked entrance changed to the entrance of Area 2. The god asks Gangrim if he's looking for something, and mentions that, should he accept the possession, the god could find it for him. Gangrim thinks these guardians are likely controlling the number of people entering the demonic realm to pit them against each other. The god asks again if Gangrim is listening, to which the protagonist responds that he won't accept, and tells the god to give up. A message appears. The Master of All Flames has used the item, Traces of the Gods, activating emphasized messages for 10 minutes. Gangrim is impressed to see the forest guardian appear before him. Another message appears, recommending that Gangrim accept the guardian's offer, stating that all other connected gods are insignificant. The Master of All Flames claims he can make a human with the flame attribute much stronger. Gangrim finds this fascinating, considering his secondary insect rank, but still decides to reject the guardian's proposal. The messages keep appearing, now with the Master of All Flames questioning why Gangrim isn't responding, insisting this is a great opportunity. The final message states that the god is watching the protagonist. After walking for a while, Gangrim encounters a giant praying mantis, but easily defeats the creature with a single strike, earning 36 pearls and continuing to collect more. He needs to gather 1,000 spiritual pearls of insect rank, which doesn't necessarily mean killing 1,000 monsters, as there are different classes of spiritual pearls. A manual outlines how to collect 1,000 insect rank spiritual pearls. A tertiary insect rank giant worm contains 1,000 pearls, a primary insect rank praying mantis holds 334, and tertiary human rank ghosts have 100 pearls. Gangrim recalls that in his past life, he wasn't very skilled and killed many praying mantises to gather pearls. But now, being much stronger, he doesn't need to do that anymore. He decides that since each ghost is worth 10 pearls, he will venture deeper into the forest. However, he soon stumbles upon trap traces and doesn't understand why there is blood in the area. Seeing several dead creatures, he suspects the masked assassin has started acting. Gangrim remembers that, in his past life, he became a target of a masked assassin in this room. Shin saved his life because she happened to be in the area, but she lost an eye during the fight. The assassin escaped, and their identity was never uncovered. Desperately, Gangrim starts running to find someone, knowing there's only one group in the room, Shin's group, where Gojun might also be. Gangrim fears the blood could belong to someone he knows. It doesn't take long before he finds Gyul collapsed on the ground, surrounded by people trying to help her. Seeing someone near her holding a potion, Gangrim assumes the worst. He immediately draws his sword and charges forward. As he approaches, he tells everyone to step away from the girl, startling the young man holding the potion. Meanwhile, in the agency's meeting room, Gong asks his subordinates if the missing trainee from the ice room has returned. Anavi responds that trainee Gunam has not yet come back. The leader states that Gunam is likely dead. Sungtae expresses disappointment, as Gunam had been the first to complete the infernal fire room. Anavi asks Gong if he wants her to search for Gunam. The leader declines, saying it's unnecessary since interference in the demonic realm is not permitted. And after all, everyone signed the agreement accepting the risk of death. Gong, authoritative as ever, declares that they must now return to the main topic, emphasizing that Area 1 had already produced someone who completed the new room. He insists that they, as Area 3, must be the first to complete the odd-numbered areas room, not wanting to lose to Area 1. After the meeting concludes, Sungtae approaches Anavi and asks how Gong can continue like this while mourning someone's death so deeply. Anavi replies that she has something else on her mind. This piques Sungtae's curiosity, and he asks what it could be. Anavi explains that she was reviewing the list of trainees from other areas after organizing the files, and noticed that one of them is a serial killer. Back in the forest, Gangrim is trying to drive away the group surrounding Gyul. Yujun, holding the potion near her, tells Gangrim to calm down so they can talk. Gangrim activates his Detect Fate ability, but before he can check, Yujun explains that they were simply treating Gyul with an antidote from the shop. Gangrim examines Yujun's fate, discovering he is a tertiary human rank with a flame attribute. The other group members are secondary human rank, tertiary human rank, and tertiary ghost rank. Gangrim also checks Gyul's status. She is a primary dragon rank with a gold attribute, suffering from poisoning, fever, and paralysis. Realizing the group was telling the truth and that Gyul needs the antidote, Gangrym asks if he can trust them to help her. While deciding the best course of action, Shin arrives with her group, calling out to him. She asks him to remain calm, insisting they are not enemies. Gangrym asks about the current situation. Ju steps forward to explain. She apologizes, saying Gyul had fallen into a trap they had set up to hunt monsters. Unaware there were trainees from other areas in the room, Ju is a secondary ghost rank with a gold attribute and a divine family name. She explains that they brought Gyul to the location to care for her and had just returned after dismantling all the traps in the area. Ju possesses the primary human rank trap installation ability, allowing her to set traps that attract prey even without bait, with the number of traps increasing with her rank. Gangrym recalls that the assassin from his past was also skilled with poison and traps, and Ju seems to be the strongest in her group, in addition to being possessed by an ancestral god. He also examines Yujun's ability, discovering he is a stealthy tertiary human rank. His skill allows him to stop breathing temporarily, rendering his body invisible. The invisibility vanishes only when he resumes breathing. Gangrym concludes that Yujun is too weak to harm Shin, but since he doesn't know who the assassin is, he decides to remain cautious of everyone. After Yujun administers the antidote, Gangrym helps Gyul to her feet and declares he will take her with him. Carrying her on his back, he considers that even if none of this group are the assassin, it's too dangerous to continue traveling with people from Area 4. Shin and Bomb, unaware of the assassin, treat the group kindly and bid them farewell as they part ways. After walking for a while, darkness falls, and they set up tents around a campfire for shelter. Gyul sits near Shin and comments that she has never slept in the forest before. Bomb approaches her sister and teases her, calling her a coward. Gyul retorts, asking if Bomb isn't afraid of being in a forest full of monsters. Bomb has no reply, but soon Gangrym arrives and throws an item to the ground, which bursts into flames. Shin asks the protagonist what it is. Gangrym explains it's supposed to repel monsters and that he bought it from the shop. Bomb opens the shop's interface and quickly finds the item, along with many other intriguing things. Gyul tells Gangrym that, in addition to being strong, he is very intelligent, and she asks if he would become her master. Caught off guard, Gangrym doesn't know how to respond. Bomb then chimes in, saying she wants the same, insisting she's probably better than her sister anyway. Gyul becomes irritated and starts arguing with Bomb, insisting that she asked first. The argument doesn't stop there, as they begin competing over who has collected more pearls and killed more monsters so far. Gangrym, sitting near the campfire, watches the chaos unfold between the sisters. He tells them to stop fighting because he isn't going to teach anyone anything. Then, he recalls the dream he had and Gyul's question about why he had gotten involved with them. Standing up, he surprises Shin with his reaction. Bomb asks where he's going. Gangrym replies that it's too noisy there and that he's going to sleep elsewhere, telling them not to wait for him to return. The group doesn't understand what's going on, while the protagonist reflects on his decision to distance himself. However, he quickly brushes off the thought, realizing there are other matters to handle. Gangrym unwraps the cloth around the egg and tries to feed it some plants. After biting a leaf, a message appears. The unknown egg has rejected the substance and demands meat. Additionally, the egg has entered a hunger strike. Annoyed by the messages, the protagonist forces the egg to eat more leaves. The growth status of the item increases to 0.4%. Feeling somewhat relieved, Gangrym climbs a tree to keep watch over the campsite. The Master of Flames asks Gangrym why he returned. Gangrym doesn't respond, prompting another god to suggest that the protagonist might be worried about his friends. The guardian god says he's seen this behavior before and calls Gangrym a tsundere. His companion asks what that means. The Master of Flames explains that tsunderes act cool and give attention begrudgingly. Listening to the god's chatter, Gangrym considers disconnecting the communication again. The unknown guardian remarks that he now understands the protagonist. The Master of Flames comments that Gangrym is with the girls' group, but is doing his push and pull act again. The unknown god adds that this seems to be Gangrym's entire personality. The Guardian of Flames declares that it's starting to irritate him. Meanwhile, the sisters continue arguing. Bomb asks Gyul why she isn't being more careful. Gyul responds curtly, telling Bomb to leave her alone because she knows she messed up. A third god appears, telling his companions to be quiet because he can't hear Gangrym's friends. The protagonist, observing this scene, remembers his past life in the Flying Tiger sect. He recalls constantly arguing with Harang while Shin laughed at their squabbles. That was their daily life back then. Gangrym reflects that his current life is now busy, but he imagines the Flying Tiger sect will remain lively and chaotic. He finds it both tiresome and comforting and feels nostalgic for those sweet memories. Snapping back to reality, he notices a sweet aroma in the air and begins to wonder what it could be. Suddenly, demon bears start emerging from a portal near the campsite, drawn by the sweet smell, and head toward the girls. Realizing this, Gangrim immediately rushes to the campsite, startling Shin. While cutting a tree branch, she asks if something is wrong. He asks if they checked the area while he was gone. Shin says they didn't. Picking up a fruit from the ground, Gangrim asks if anyone had been there. The fruit is a tertiary insect rank demon peach, a fruit favored by demons, known for its alluring aroma, but lacking any distinct flavor. Gangrim recalls not seeing any peach trees when setting up camp, leading him to deduce that someone must have placed it there intentionally, possibly the assassin using their cursed invisibility technique. Gyul approaches and mentions that Gojun passed by the camp earlier. Gangrim asks if it was really him or a stranger from another area. The girl says it was Gojun, and it hadn't been long ago. Bomb asks the protagonist if the crazy writer had done something since he had noticed him staring at the camp for a while. Gangrim begins to wonder if Gojun could be the assassin, though he doubts that lunatic could think in such calculated terms. He explains that there were several demon-attracting fruits scattered around. Shin asks if it's possible that someone intentionally put them in danger. Gangrim replies that he doesn't know yet, but one thing is certain. They need to be cautious of the humans advancing through the forest. He says he'll gather the fruits from the area. Meanwhile, the masked assassin is hiding, listening to their entire conversation. Suddenly, Gangrim senses a presence, but it quickly disappears. Even the nearby demon bears seem to notice something strange. Elsewhere in the forest, Gojun is attacking a group of ghosts, which he easily defeats. He reflects on how boring this place is, dismissing the plot as trash. He laments the lack of rivals, friends, or enemies. No interesting gods or heroes, just low-level demons. The crazy writer begins questioning his role in this world. He recalls the sisters' conversation about Gangrim's strength, mentioning how he had defeated a Yeti. This revelation astonishes Gojun, as he now realizes the protagonist had managed to take down a boss-level demon that he himself had never encountered. Moreover, Gangrim was the first to clear the ice room and had even rescued someone. Gojun struggles to comprehend how anyone could achieve all of that. He then starts questioning whether his own defeat by Gunam in the infernal fire room might have been orchestrated by Gangrim. He speculates that Gangrim might be someone from the future who knows all the strategies and rewards, now trying to eliminate him, to hoard everything for himself. Gojun concludes that if this theory is true, it makes perfect sense. Determined to confirm his suspicions, he sprints off to find Gangrim. As the protagonist walks, he checks the map, which shows a discovery rate of 35%. Suddenly, the Guardians resume speaking to Gangrim, asking why he isn't stopping to hunt since he's only collected 200 spiritual pearls. The Master of Flames also questions why Gangrim keeps staring at the map, suggesting he could possess it since navigation is his specialty. Gangrim retorts by asking the gods why they haven't explained who left the demon peaches at the campsite. The Guardian replies that he doesn't know because he didn't see it happen. Rolling up the map, the protagonist begins to doubt the gods after hearing this. The Master of Flames asks Gangrim what he's looking for, receiving no response. His companion suggests it might be the forest's secret. Gangrim keeps walking until a message appears stating that his prolonged focus has heightened his senses to class 25, sharpening them significantly. It doesn't take long for Gangrim to detect the scent of human blood, putting him on high alert. Activating his Seal Fate ability, he searches for the source. It doesn't take him long to find a body wounded by the masked assassin. He immediately activates his flame ability and launches an attack, but the assassin manages to block it. A message appears, indicating that the analyzed area has 0 people. After creating some distance from Gangrim, the assassin remarks that if someone faints, the first instinct should be to check if they're okay, not to draw a sword. Gangrim tells him to shut up. The assassin, now with his mask ablaze from Gangrim's sword strike, removes it and comments that the protagonist is quick to figure things out. After removing the mask, he reveals his true identity. It was Yujun, of tertiary human rank with the fire attribute, now holding the divine title, Fear of the Living and Dead. He says he can't leave witnesses, which is why he kills people. Then, he charges at Gangrim using his Killer Impulse ability, a primary demonic rank skill that absorbs the attributes of those killed by him, but it comes with karmic consequences. The protagonist notices that Yu Jun's attributes have doubled since they last met. While defending himself, Gangrim asks how many people Yu Jun has killed. The assassin responds, asking if Gangrim can sense that he's killed many. Gangrim questions why Yu Jun seems happy about it, and if hunting demons wasn't enough. The assassin replies that he also enjoys killing demons, and that he tried to stay calm, but his Lord Knuckle had given him the power to kill people, so it would be a waste not to use it. He then asks why Gangram is angry, suggesting that if Gangram had a power that could only be activated by killing people, wouldn't he have done the same? After saying this, Yoojun begins to turn invisible, but Gangram doesn't let down his guard, telling him that assuming everyone would do the same is wrong. Yoojun had activated his sense configuration, which enabled his invisibility. Gangram focuses and tells his opponent that just because he can't see him doesn't mean he'll be easy to defeat, and if Yoojun is so eager to throw his life away, so be it. Yoojun appears behind the protagonist, ready to attack, but Gangram reacts quickly and blocks the attack with ease. Yoojun is surprised that Gangram could defend himself, but it's not over yet. Yoojun rapidly changes positions, launching another attack, now telling Gangram that it will be worth killing him because he will become even stronger after this duel. Gangram manages to block the attack again, but he knows he can't let things continue like this. Despite being concerned about using the ability he had stolen from the Yeti for the first time, he realizes he has no other option. The ability is Battle Instincts, a tertiary ghost rank skill that fills the user with fighting spirit. If the opponent is stronger, it increases the user's attributes to bridge the gap. The larger the power difference, the greater the boost. Gangram activates Battle Instincts, and a message immediately confirms that the target is stronger than him, causing his senses to surge with fighting spirit. Yoojun begins to feel frightened by Gangram's new aura. Now, stronger than ever, Gangram asks his opponent if he really has the nerve to think he's strong. Yoojun, terrified, asks Gangram why he suddenly looks like this. Gangram charges at him, also using his flame ability. As he attacks, he says that perhaps it would be satisfying to kill an opponent stronger than himself. Then, after landing a sword strike on Yoojun, he delivers a flaming punch directly to Yoojun's eye, leaving the assassin defenseless, watching as Gangram prepares to kill him. Suddenly, Gojun appears, calling out to Gangram, saying he's come to help. Gangram turns, and upon seeing him, identifies the crazy writer as someone even stronger and immediately launches an attack. Gojun, confused, asks if this is some kind of recruitment event for companions, but he quickly has to defend himself against Gangram's attack, managing to block it effortlessly. He wonders what to do in this situation. He realizes that Gangram has lost control, overwhelmed by an improper power. After disarming Gangram, he punches him in the chin, telling him that he can't let his mind be so easily manipulated. Seeing Gangram unconscious, Gojun is impressed by what he had just done. Even though the villain was escaping, he thinks it's not the right time for him to be defeated. The writer starts nudging the protagonist with his foot, asking if he's okay. Noticing that Gangram is waking up, Gojun asks if they're companions now. Gangram uses a recovery potion to heal his chin, which was badly bruised from the punch, but still tells Gojun to find someone else to form a group with. The lunatic replies that he likes Gangram and considers everyone else to be mere background characters with no personality or story. Gojun picks up the sword and tosses it back to Gangram, saying he wants to be like him and is asking for peace between them. Meanwhile, Yoojun is running frantically, thinking he needs to eliminate all witnesses. But now there are two people so strong he can't face them. Hidden and watching his friends search for him, he ponders his options, but quickly concludes that he just needs to become stronger. Not long after, he runs toward the group that had been worried about him, as they'd been searching for a while and had already found a human body in the forest. Yoojun claims he had been looking for them too, but had gotten hurt. Before finishing his sentence, he collapses near his companions, pretending to be injured. His friends, alarmed, immediately begin using their abilities to try to heal him, but as they approach, the assassin attacks them, leaving no chance for survival. After killing them all, Yoojun activates his killer's intention ability, stealing 10% of his opponent's attributes and accumulating karma. A message appears. Fear of the living and dead is pleased with Yoojun's performance and rewards him with the Necklace of Blades. This item increases his strength by 10%. Seeing the reward, the assassin laughs to himself and declares that now he will kill Gangram, thanking his Lord Knuckle. But suddenly, an accumulation of the water element forms around Yoojun, reducing all his attributes by 10%. A message appears. Fear of the living and dead reassures the assassin not to worry and states that Gangram, being fire attributed, is also weakened. Yoojun, pleased, remarks how happy he is to share the same weakness as the protagonist, vowing to find him before the rain intensifies. Gangram is cutting down trees when the assassin finds him. Exhausted, the protagonist comments that there's only one tree left. Yoojun, using his invisibility ability, prepares to attack. Despite having his back turned, Gangram manages to block the attack, leaving the assassin shocked by his reaction. Undeterred, Yoojun strikes again, causing Gangram's sword to start cracking. Desperate for revenge, the assassin prepares for another attack, asking Gangram if he still thinks he's weak. The protagonist continues defending himself as Yoo-jun taunts that, had he known Gangram was so weak, he would have killed fewer people. Attacking relentlessly, Yoo-jun demands to know where Gangram's friend is. When Gangram doesn't answer, Yoo-jun warns him that he'll regret getting involved. Gangram begins to smile, further enraging the assassin. As their swords clash, Gangram suddenly starts pushing Yoo-jun back as water begins to surround him. Gangram's attribute shifts to water, restoring his previously reduced attributes. Now, with water energy accumulating around him, Gangram gains a 10% attribute boost, while Yoo-jun's attributes are reduced by 20%. Confused, the assassin struggles to understand, believing Gangram should have also been weakened. He turns to his master, questioning if Gangram wasn't fire attributed after all. The protagonist, locking eyes with the assassin, asks if that's really what fear of the living and the dead had told him. Yoo-jun receives a message from his lord, assuring him that he couldn't have been mistaken, and that, even with the attribute restrictions, the assassin is still stronger than Gangram. Encouraged by this, Yoo-jun quickly pulls back his sword and strikes hard, breaking Gangram's weapon as he defends. He follows up with a powerful kick, declaring that he's still the stronger one, sending Gangram crashing into a tree. Without hesitation, Yoo-jun charges again, pressing his sword to the protagonist's face. He taunts Gangram, saying he's had enough fun and that he doesn't need to be afraid. He won't be alone, as Yoo-jun plans to kill his entire group as well. But before Yoo-jun can continue, Gangram grabs a branch from inside the tree and thrusts it into his opponent's stomach, retorting that they'll now see who kills whom. Yoo-jun collapses to the ground, the branch lodged in his abdomen, but he mocks Gangram, saying it's just a branch and there's no reason to be scared. Gangram responds that it's not just any branch. He pulls it out and points it at the assassin's chest. Yoo-jun begins begging for help from the fear of the living and the dead, but Gangram coldly tells him it's too late and severs his connection to his lord. Gangram plunges the branch into the assassin's chest, killing him instantly, and remarks that Yoo-jun will regret getting involved with him. He then activates his Seal Fate ability. Returning to his hunt, Gangram reflects on his unexpected gains. He's obtained the Seven-Pointed Bolt, a tertiary dragon rank weapon. It's a sword crafted from a branch of a divine tree struck by lightning, enhancing the tree's inherent power. Gangram admits he had searched the entire demonic realm for that item, cutting down all the trees in the area until he set up a lightning rod on one of them. Now, after gaining equipment-related abilities from Yoo-jun, his destiny class has somehow changed. Still, a voice lingers in his mind, accusing him of killing the assassin. Agonizing over it, Gangram hears footsteps approaching. It's Go-jun, carrying the head of a giant praying mantis. He asks Gangram if he's killing these creatures again because of Yoo-jun. Gangram sarcastically asks if Go-jun shouldn't be guarding the gates of District 4 instead of being here. The protagonist recalls when Go-jun asked to be friends, which had infuriated him because it made him lose the chance to kill the assassin. The crazy writer, removing the sword from his neck, tells Gangram he can do it again, and insists he only wanted to gain his trust. Gangram, having anticipated Go-jun's arrival now that Gunam is dead, deduces that the writer is just trying to make himself feel safer. He agrees to their friendship, but on one condition: Go-jun must do everything Gangram asks. Overjoyed, the lunatic immediately asks what he should do. Gangram tells him the first task is to retrieve his demonic realm map so they can update their exploration rate. Looking at the map, Gangram notices an entrance to another area nearby and instructs Go-jun to head there and guard it. As Go-jun watches Gangram collect pearls from the defeated monster, he comments that he's gone several days without hearing any news and decided to return because he assumed everything was resolved. Gangram replies that he hasn't yet found what he's looking for and suspects the assassin may have escaped. Go-jun approaches and tells Gangram to end it already, saying he knows what happened. He grabs the necklace Gangram is wearing, noting that it must be what he took from Yoo-jun's corpse. The protagonist removes the lunatic's hand and explains that the necklace was a gift from the gods, and since his blade had broken, he purchased a new weapon from the shop. He tells Go-jun to stop trying to involve him in his paranoias because he doesn't know what happened to the assassin. Go-jun shrugs it off, saying he believes what Gangram is saying, but still asks if Gangram had killed Yoo-jun, suggesting he could confide in him since they're on the same side now. Gangram doesn't respond and starts walking, telling his companion to forget about it and stop forcing their friendship. Realizing he won't get answers easily, Go-jun changes the subject, asking if Gangram wants him to collect spiritual pearls. Standing up, Go-jun congratulates Shin for already completing the room. The protagonist watches as the lunatic walks toward a creature to collect the last spiritual pearl to finish the mission. The next day in the lobby, people hear the sisters loudly begging to become Gangram's disciples. Despite their insistence, the protagonist refuses. Bom, however, promises to do whatever he asks, even fetch his coffee. Gyul, on the other hand, asks if Gangram is rejecting them because they're too weak, reminding him that they have divine contracts. Gangram asks what divine contracts they are referring to, activating his evaluate fate ability. Bomb explains that her contract is with the Moon Huntress, while Gyul reveals hers is with the archer who shoots the sun. Gangram is impressed to learn that the sisters have contracts with Apollo and Artemis, commenting that their gods suit them perfectly. Upon hearing the compliment, Bomb asks again if he will accept them as disciples. Gangram tells them that they'll first need permission from their gods. Gyul then asks him who his guardian deity is. The protagonist replies that he hasn't made any divine contracts. The sisters ask why. Gangram sighs and says he hasn't found a god he wants to align with. Bomb, shocked, asks if he would consider a contract with the father of gods and humans, suggesting that they'd then share gods from the same group. Before she can say more, Gyul covers her mouth, awkwardly shifting the conversation by saying that Shim also didn't want a divine contract, and that she didn't expect Gangram to act the same way. Gangram states that he doesn't think the time is right for a divine contract, and reiterates that he won't be their master. Gyul starts doubting her earlier impressions, wondering if there's another reason Gangram is avoiding a divine contract. The protagonist insists he lacks the skills to be their master. Before the conversation can continue, everyone at the table is startled, as a man collapses after opening a nearby door. One of the sisters recognizes him and says he's the man from the first room, a priest. Gangram helps the man to a seat and asks if he's okay and if he's still struggling with the demonic beasts. The priest admits he hasn't been able to handle them because they terrify him. The protagonist notes that the priest's arrival couldn't have been better timed, as the sisters were cornering him with their persistence. With his head lowered, the priest confesses that as an awakened individual unable to kill demonic beasts, he feels like a failure. Hearing this, Gangram asks if the priest would like help hunting the creatures. The priest is surprised by the offer. The sisters immediately jump in, saying they'll go too. Gangram tells them that they'll be the ones doing the hunting, and on top of that, they'll need to obey his orders and drop the master thing. The sisters cheer and rush off to prepare for the hunt. Watching them, Gangram begins to wonder if he's really going to let them join. The priest hesitantly asks if it's really okay, feeling like he's being a burden. Gangram reassures him that it's no trouble, though internally he considers doing something similar to what Gojun had done in his past life. He tells the priest that they should help each other out. The man begins to cry, grateful for the help. His name is Johann, and his class is tertiary dragon rank with the earth attribute. His deity is Hermes, the guardian of doctors and travelers. Gangram also checks the priest's abilities, discovering he possesses healing hands, a primary ghost rank skill. This ability heals the target's wounds and removes status effects like bleeding, paralysis, poisoning, and more. As the skill's rank increases, its magic cost decreases, and its cooldown time shortens. Meanwhile, in the agency's meeting room, Anavi comments to her boss that he seems to be in a good mood. He replies that it's because the first person to successfully complete the raid was from their area. Songtae notes that the time was significantly better than that of Area 1. Gong agrees, saying it's great news, though he tenses upon hearing that the team captain, Princess, is present. He still asks what she wants. The woman explains that she heard the news and wanted to congratulate them, as the best time came from an awakened individual from Area 2. She then asks if there's a possibility that Areas 1 and 2 might meet in the next event. Gong says it's possible. This woman, Shomun, is affiliated with the Fate Protection Association and serves as the captain of Team 1 in Seoul. She asks Gong if he would like to make a bet. Curious, he inquires about the wager. Siomun proposes betting on who will have the fastest attacker in the next challenge, an awakened individual from Gong's Area 2 team or her own Area 1 team. Gong asks about the stakes. Siomun says the loser must grant the winner any one wish. Sensing Gong's hesitation, she teases him, asking if he's scared. Furious at the implication, Gong retorts that of course he's not afraid, as his team will undoubtedly win. The woman presses him to make the bet, and Gong, without much thought, accepts the proposal. After the matter is settled, Siomun leaves the room with a smile, saying she can't wait for the results and looks forward to meeting again soon. Once she's gone, Gong, addressing his stunned subordinates, asks if they heard her clearly, emphasizing that the team must win at all costs. He declares that special measures need to be taken. Back in the forest, Gangram is helping Johann collect spiritual pearls. Opening his bag, Gangram takes out the remaining pearls Johann needs to complete the mission and reach a total of 1,000. With Johann managing to complete the swordsman's room, he kneels, thanks the protagonist, and says he couldn't believe how many pearls had been collected in just 2 days. Gangram comments to the priest that he also worked hard, using his healing ability to counteract the effects of frostbite. Johann replies that it was nothing and that he considered himself useless. The protagonist disagrees and states that, in truth, his contribution was significant, as every person plays their part with the skills they have. He adds that people simply weren't recognizing Johan's worth. These words move the priest. Noticing this, Gangrym tells them to prepare to move on to the 5th room and then asks Johan if he received the message. Johan confirms that he did. The protagonist comments that the next room won't be completed as quickly as this one, so they should prepare. The message was from Anavi saying, "Hello, awakened companions. Now that the swordsman's room has been completed, the doors to the 5th room will open. There you will face greater difficulties and spend more time than in the previous rooms, so be prepared when accepting the challenge." Gangrym tells the priest that the advanced group entered the 5th room 5 days ago, so they should enter the next morning. Johan agrees and says they were scheduled to meet at the totem. The next day, the duo enters the new room. The priest, impressed by the place, comments to Gangrym on its beauty, barely believing it's a demonic area. It doesn't take long before they receive a message saying they had entered the Great Tongue Room and that it had special completion conditions. First, the reward for completing the demonic area would vary according to its difficulty. Second, the use of store windows is prohibited. Third, leaving the demonic area is only possible after the attack is completed. The protagonist recalls that because of the third condition, he had endured great hardship in his past life. They could only return to the lobby after defeating the boss. Johan asks Gangrym if they won't be informed of the conditions. The protagonist replies, no, saying they must discover them on their own. Hearing this, the priest questions why this place has so many secrets, deducing that it might be because of its name, the Great Tongue Room. Gangrym explains that isn't the reason, but rather because they would need to show their tongues. After some time in the room, the protagonist sets up camp, as they'll be there for a while. Johan, impressed, tells his partner he was wondering why so much preparation was needed, but now understands it's because they can't leave. Gangrym agrees that it's a good idea to have everything ready in advance. He lights incense on the campfire to ward off demonic beasts and says he'll explore the area while the priest guards the camp. The protagonist begins walking and thinks that now that the camp is ready, he needs to look for food. Elsewhere in the forest, a group discovers some fruit trees but wonders if it really is an orchard, as the place seems incredibly artificial. Furthermore, it's heavily guarded by demonic beasts. Sangwon questions whether the fruits are dangerous. His companion comments that they either face death or return to Shin's camp. The magnate orders his colleagues to stop talking about that girl, claiming he would rather die than bow to her. Sangwon remembers Shin saying they were incompatible and that she had no choice, reflecting on his pride and inability to submit to a woman who abandoned him. Just thinking about Shin telling him they shouldn't see each other anymore irritates him. Sangwon commands the group to kill the demonic beasts and gather the fruits while they still have strength. Park asks the magnate if he doesn't plan to join them, remarking that if he's always going to stay hidden, there was no point in buying a weapon. Sangwon replies that the weapon was for self-defense. Besides, it didn't make sense to have hired them if he was going to expose himself anyway. Since they had already been paid for the job, they should hurry up. The group, after hearing the boss's order, launches the attack, easily killing the beasts, which started running instead of fighting back. Park comments that those creatures were weaker than he had expected. Once everything was settled, Sangwon arrives and asks if they had killed them all. His subordinate confirms they had. The magnate orders them to quickly grab the fruits and leave before more demonic beasts appear. Ju climbs up immediately and remarks that this was something he used to do all the time. While the group gathers the fruits, Sangwon begins wondering why the creatures were so thin, considering there were so many fruits around. Suddenly, the forest guardian starts speaking to the magnate, warning that if they ate the fruits, the master would tear out their tongues. Sangwon asks who this master is and notices more beasts approaching. The guardian explains that the master is not a good man, and that it would be better for him to flee. The demonic beasts, now under orders, start heading toward the group to rip out their tongues. A group of demonic monkeys closes in rapidly. Seeing this, Sangwon orders his companions to run. His subordinates run faster than him, leaving him behind. Desperate, he starts screaming that they should protect him, but it's too late. A creature leaps onto his back, grabs him, and opens its mouth to tear out his tongue. The demonic monkey notices someone approaching, and looking forward, is struck down by a sword. Sangwon is surprised and begins crying upon hearing Gangrym say that if he believed in luck, this must surely be his lucky day. The magnate remembers this is the man who reads fates, named Gangrym. Wiping his tears, Sangwon says he didn't ask for his help and won't forgive him just because he intervened. The protagonist replies that he doesn't need to worry. He wouldn't help him even if he knelt and begged. Furious, Sangwon orders him to repeat that, but Gangrym immediately strikes down a creature behind the magnate, splattering blood onto him and leaving him terrified. The protagonist tells him it's best to get out of there. Park and the group come running back, asking the boss if he's all right. Sangwon begins apologizing, claiming he didn't know what came over him to run so fast, but remarks how lucky it was that Gangram saved him. Furious, Sangwon vows not to let this situation slide and promises revenge. Meanwhile, the protagonist continues fighting the group of monsters. Using his flame abilities combined with his sword, he easily defeats the demonic monkeys. Realizing he's now alone in the area, Gangram decides to feed the mysterious egg, which seemed eager to consume the dead creatures. However, the protagonist offers it a fruit instead, knowing he had to be cautious to avoid the egg becoming uncontrollable. As he feeds it, Gangram wonders what he himself will eat. Back at the camp, the protagonist returns with a leg from a demonic beast he had killed. The priest is astonished, having never seen anything like it before. Holding the leg, Gangram tells Johan that he's going to help him now, but Johan responds that he doesn't know how. The protagonist then bites into the leg of the demonic beast, leaving the priest horrified. After eating a piece of the meat, Gangram remarks that in fact, all the demonic beasts in this area are poisonous. Soon, blood begins dripping from his ears, and his vision blurs. The protagonist tells the priest that this is his chance to repay him by helping to heal him, and hands him a recovery tea for magical power, advising him to use it if necessary because he trusts him. Johan then activates his healing hands ability. As he's being healed, Gangram jokes that he can already see the light at the end of the tunnel, to which the priest, worried, tells him not to follow the light. However, it doesn't take long before the protagonist starts eating the meat again, getting poisoned all over again. Johan, though confused about the reasoning, continues to heal him tirelessly. After some time, Gangram comments that he couldn't take it anymore but realizes he had grown accustomed to the weak venom. The priest, relieved, feels happy, thinking his partner would stop eating the meat, but is horrified when he sees him grab a raw piece. The protagonist explains that he now thinks it's better to eat the meat raw. This continued until nightfall, with Johan incessantly using his healing ability on him. Gangram finally stopped after acquiring the skill poison resistance. The priest, exhausted from overusing his ability, faints before the protagonist can even thank him. Gangram then places him inside the tent, admitting that his companion worked very hard. He also acknowledges that it took longer than expected to obtain the skill poison resistance of tertiary insect rank, which allows the user to resist various poisons and nullifies the effect of poisoning. However, the higher the poison level, the less effective the skill becomes. The protagonist reflects that it was a good idea to give several magical recovery items to the priest before starting all of this. Gangram had offered him Korean pork soup, which increases magical power by 10%, horseradish extract, which boosts recovery rates by 5%, and colorful dumplings, which also enhance recovery by 5%. Without these, Johan would have collapsed from magical exhaustion much earlier. Not long after, Gangram tries to wake the priest, although he wants to let him rest a bit after such effort. When Johan doesn't wake up quickly, Gangram closes the tent, realizing he has no choice as he senses something approaching. Suddenly, the protagonist strikes with his sword, making enough noise to wake Johan. Gangram notices he hit the target and remarks that he knew this group would return. He warns his companion they are under attack and asks the priest to stay inside the tent, telling him to simply shout if he's in danger. The protagonist steps out and, seeing the group, admits he doesn't recognize any of them, suspecting they might be from Area 1. The group leader, already injured, reveals himself to be of primary human rank and claims they only wanted some food. He adds that if they cooperate, they'll be left alive. His accomplice, of tertiary rank, says they are thieves, not murderers. Gangram responds that if they eat the food from this demonic area, they'll die anyway. Moreover, he states that he isn't a murderer either. The protagonist recalls that even in his previous life, Area 1 caused many problems. For this reason, he refuses to hand over food to the bandits, who then attack with the intent to kill him. The first attacker misses, giving Gangram the chance to grab his head and strike it with a knee blow. While fighting the other members of the group, the protagonist finds it strange, as these bandits had high skill levels and should be able to gather food easily in this area. Gangram starts deducing that the people from Area 1 might be trying to control the other areas, which explains their actions. The thief dueling the protagonist comments to the leader that he is very strong. The leader then orders everyone to retreat to inform the captain. Before Gangram can react, he notices the leader throwing something, a smoke bomb, giving them enough time to flee. Inside the tent, the priest is praying when he hears the explosion. Immediately, he starts shouting, asking if the protagonist is okay. However, as he prepares to leave, he remembers Gangram's warning not to leave the tent under any circumstances. Johan freezes, wondering what could happen if he disobeyed, questioning why his partner gave such an order. Trembling, He reasons that he could disrupt the fight if he went out, but also admits he can't keep hiding forever. The protagonist opens the tent, startling Johan, who, realizing it's his partner, asks if he's hurt. Gangnam replies that the bandits used a smoke bomb to escape, but that everything is fine. The priest then asks if they were under attack. The protagonist explains that the bandits tried to steal their food, and that, in the last demonic zone, there were many conflicts between areas, with some people even being killed. He adds that it seems this room would be the same, so they need to stay on high alert. This leaves the priest frightened and dejected, and he asks if Gangnam wouldn't fare better on his own. The protagonist questions why Johan is saying that. Johan responds that all he does is weigh the team down, and that it doesn't make sense to fulfill his duties while constantly being helped by others. Gangnam then mentions what Miss Anavi said at the beginning, that people unwilling to fight should have other useful abilities. The priest begins reflecting on why his partner is saying this, but before he can reply, Gangnam places a hand on his shoulder and asks if he remembers what he said earlier, that people simply don't yet recognize his worth. The protagonist adds that, once they return to the lobby, the totem will heal them, and they'll receive medicines daily. But when training ends and things really begin, and when everyone realizes how expensive regeneration pills are in the shop, he's certain all those who kicked Johan out of their groups will regret it bitterly. Gangnam remarks that while he can fight, the priest can heal people, and each person has a purpose. The protagonist says he doesn't like trying to predict the future, but he's sure that, with Johan's abilities, he'll save many lives. After saying this, Gangnam asks Johan if he really wants to give up. The priest reflects, wondering if he can truly save people. Realizing he's more important than he thought, he tells his partner he won't give up, and begs the protagonist to keep helping him. Gangnam assures him he'll help, and adds that he also needs Johan's help, as he might still eat more poisonous food. 3 days later, at Shin's camp, the sisters Bom and Gyul return from a search. The leader asks if they found anything. Bom replies no, and suggests they may need to go deeper. Gyul, on the other hand, complains that everyone there is too weak to be of any help. Her sister scolds her, telling her not to say that because everyone is contributing, and Shin agrees. Gyul reflects for a moment, and comments that it would have been better to go with Gangnam, since she could have learned many things from him. He's probably advanced much further while they remain stuck in the same place. Shin says that until Gangnam returns, they should keep doing their best. Gyul asks when the protagonist will return. The leader replies she's not sure, but maybe it will be that afternoon. Suddenly, they notice someone entering the tent. It's Gojun. The archer Shin, irritated, asks what he's doing there. Gojun says he was looking for Gangnam but didn't find him. Shin is clearly unhappy to see the chatterbox in the camp. Still irritated, the archer asks how he managed to get into the camp without triggering the alarm traps. The lunatic replies that he just disarmed them all and provocatively adds that they should have installed the traps more carefully. Shin, suspicious, demands to know why Gojun is wandering around alone. Smiling, he responds that he was just looking for Gangnam, assuming he'd be there since the gods are only talking about his arrival. Shin informs him she hasn't seen the protagonist. The lunatic laughs and suggests that perhaps Gangnam will show up if he destroys this camp full of extras. Furious, Gyul asks who he thinks he's talking to. Gojun replies that they're just side characters and states that there are plenty of other useless people out there. Shin steps in and asks if that's really what he thinks of people. The lunatic grabs a fruit and tosses it to Shin, who catches it. A message immediately pops up. You have received the item Passion Fruit, completing the mission low-level revelation room. Shin asks Gojun if he isn't tired of eating passion fruits. He laughs and replies that he thought she'd realize he was just trying to be nice, but even without Gangnam there, they're still just side characters. Unable to take the provocation, Gyul shoots an arrow that narrowly misses the chatterbox's head and says he really thought they'd want to befriend someone like him. Shin tells the girl to calm down. Gojun begins activating his skill, saying they're leaving him no choice but to resort to force. The plant master crushes the passion fruit in her hand and warns the lunatic writer that he'd better back down before she uses force as well. The chatterbox licks the juice off his hand, draws his sword, and declares that since he can't fight Gangnam, facing Shin will entertain him for now. Gyul already has her bow ready to fire another arrow at Gojun, while Bom tries to calm everyone down. Suddenly, Janja arrives at the tent, calling for Shin and saying it seems like someone is cooking demonic beasts nearby. Everyone freezes at the news, stopping the argument immediately. Gojun, now pleased to be there, asks Janja where those people are. In the forest, Gangnam is preparing soup. It has been 10 days since the advance team entered the room, and the food they brought from the lobby is running out. The only edible things in this demonic area are the fruits and the poisonous meat of the demonic beasts. Gangrim imagines the value of real food in this place must be incredibly high, and considering that people in the tutorial earn only about 100 spiritual pearls a day, it would be better to figure out how to cook. While cooking, Gangrim notices Gojun and Shin approaching. Adding some antidotes to the soup, he greets Shin, who warns him not to eat that since almost everything in this demonic area is poisonous. Gangrim reassures her, saying he's already purified all the poison and just needed to cook it with some antidotes. He then offers Shin a bowl of soup, and she wonders how he managed to make it. Before Gangrim can hand the bowl to her, Gojun grabs it, saying he'll taste it himself. Gangrim informs him that each portion costs 1,000 spiritual pearls. The chatterbox complains about the price, saying it's too expensive, but decides to buy just one portion. Shin, in turn, says she'd like one too. Gangrim replies that she can pay only 200 pearls. The lunatic writer is outraged by the preferential pricing but has already paid for his food. Gangrim explains that the owner sets the price and doesn't offer refunds. Gojun comments that he has no choice, since Shin is clearly the female protagonist of this story. Gangrim hands her a bowl of soup for 200 pearls, leaving the chatterbox flustered. Shin's group also approaches, and upon realizing it's food, everyone gathers to eat. Gangrim asks the plant master and Gojun if they're trying to find high-quality items in the area. Shin confirms and says she wants his help. The lunatic writer, however, comments that things haven't been going well because of Zone 1 and that he thinks it's better to join someone since it's easier than sticking with a group of extras. Shin insists that everyone needs to stay united in such situations. The chatterbox counters, saying he's never seen a protagonist group with 10 or more people. The girl retorts, asking if he realizes they aren't protagonists in a soap opera. Gangrim suggests it would be better to form a duo with Shin, while Gojun could return to the camp and assemble another search team. The chatterbox, however, insists on staying near the protagonist, becoming even more determined. After much persistence, he finally manages to remain with the group. Back at the camp, Gangrim declares that, regardless of what anyone says, he won't take everyone along, but Shin insists, remarking that it will be difficult for Gangrim to face the people from Zone 1 alone. She asks if he doesn't find it strange that all the other areas are trying to attack them since, every time they've met, fights have broken out. The protagonist reflects for a moment and admits that this is exactly what has been happening. He decides he needs more information about the situation in Zone 1, but considers that taking the priest along might be too complicated. He tells Johan that it would be better for him to stay at the camp this time. However, Johan insists, saying they shouldn't go alone. Gangrim replies that, actually, if Johan went, he wouldn't be able to focus on the fight. Shin reassures the priest that it's fine for him to stay. The protagonist promises Johan that he'll be safer at the camp and guarantees there will be plenty of opportunities for him to use his abilities. Gangrim begins walking and says he needs to gather more information on his own. Before he leaves, Shin says she understands but reminds him that if anything happens, they'll be there to help. In the orchard, the protagonist defeats a group of demonic beasts. The gods begin discussing among themselves, noting that Gangrim has grown much stronger. One of them counters that it's too early to say that, as the beasts there are too weak. They agree that only when he ventures deeper, where the creatures are much stronger, will they truly gauge his strength. While walking, Gangrim notices that some of the fruits have started turning blue, though they are still scarce. Suddenly, his danger sense activates, and he realizes something is next to him. He can't believe a creature like that could approach unnoticed, and wonders where it came from. It's a demonic gorilla, ready to attack. Instantly, Gangrim activates his hermit ability, rendering himself invisible. The confused creature doesn't understand what happened to its target. The protagonist, now perched atop the tree the gorilla is holding, sets it ablaze to distract the beast. Taking advantage of the distraction, Gangrim attacks, decapitating the gorilla in a single strike. As he fights, he reflects that this might be the true meaning of being overgeared, a player who relies on overly powerful items to level up. After defeating the demonic beast, he realizes he can't use this same strategy against the people from Zone 1, as he still lacks the confidence. Stowing away his lightning item, Gangrim begins pondering his next move and decides he needs to find where that creature came from. Before proceeding, he eats a blue passion fruit, completing the mission Revelation Room Low Level. Gangrim knows he needs to increase his poison resistance and wonders if the people from Zone 1 have already completed the mission up to the intermediate level, given the number of fruitless trees in the area. A god asks Gangrim why he's eating the mission item, but the protagonist doesn't reply. While eating, a message appears, indicating he consumed a passion fruit, slightly increasing his magic power and poison resistance. A younger god asks his elder if eating those fruits really boosts magic power and poison resistance. The elder confirms, explaining that this is why the association chose that location. After a while, the gods begin to wonder if Gangrym will stop eating the fruits, noting that if he keeps going, he'll end up vomiting. The protagonist continues eating until he receives a message indicating his poison resistance skill has reached a new level. That was his limit. Unable to take more, he spits the fruit directly into the face of someone passing beneath the tree. The group looks up, spotting the protagonist, and asks if he is Gangrym from Zone 2. Gangrym questions how Josh knows his name. The man responds that it doesn't matter, but mentions that their captain wants to talk to him. He then asks if Gangrym would like to accompany them. Josh tells Gangrym that if he complies and comes along without complaining, they might even be kind to him. The protagonist recalls the group that tried to attack him on the first day, and figures these guys likely know them. The gods comment that Gangrym is a brave man who wouldn't bow his head to obey. Surprisingly, it doesn't take long for the protagonist to climb down the tree and announce that he'll go with them. This decision even surprises the gods. After some time walking, they arrive at the Zone 2 camp. Josh informs Gangrym that the captain is in the deepest part of the area. Gangrym notices that everyone is staring at him and realizes that Zone 2 has twice as many people as Zone 1. The crowd seems impressed to see him, as he is quite well known. When they reach the captain's tent, Hong immediately recognizes him. The protagonist asks for his name, and the captain replies that he is Hong, the captain of Zone 1, and that it is a pleasure to meet him. Hong is of primary ghost rank with the other attribute. Gangrym is impressed by the weapon the man possesses, especially considering they are still in the 5th room. It's the Skybreaker Halberd, a tertiary dragon-ranked replica, a long-range weapon that allows versatile attacks such as thrusts, slashes, and stabs, with high attack power. The protagonist understands why Zone 1 dominated so many attacks in his past life but shows no intimidation. He asks the captain what the purpose of this conversation is. Pointing his weapon at Gangrym, Hong replies that it's simple. He wants them to work together. The protagonist comments that if that's all, it seems he won't be able to meet the requirements. He then turns and begins to leave the tent, saying that if that's all, he's already on his way out. However, 2 swords cross in front of Gangrym, blocking his exit. He notices a large number of people ready for combat. Hong explains that Gangrym misunderstood and now must cooperate, even against his will. If he doesn't cooperate, he will die right there. Gangrym then reveals an item and declares that if they kill him, they will deeply regret it. The captain is surprised to see the item. It's the princess's revenge symbol. This special item ensures that if the bearer is killed by a human, the killer will be marked with the revenge symbol and become the target of the captain of the princess's Destiny Protection Association team. Hong realizes the gravity of the situation. If he kills Gangrym, he would be doomed, as the princess's team captain would hunt him down for revenge. He recalls that the person who sent that weapon to Gangrym was at the same level as the princess, who had promised a reward for the attack. The captain asks Gangrym if he also received a message. Surprised, the protagonist confirms and learns that Hong also received a message. Gangrym remembers receiving a message from the princess while in the lobby. We propose a challenge in the next demonic zone for the trainee with the highest overall ranking. Achieving the top rank among the challengers of the Great Tongue Room will ensure additional rewards upon success, as well as temporary items to aid in the room's attack. This message was sent by the captain of the princess's team, from Team 2 of the Soul Branch of the Destiny Protection Association. Gangrym deduces that Hong received his weapon from the captain of the Zone 1 team, and that there seems to be some sort of competition between the team captains. The Zone 1 captain orders everyone to listen and declares that Gangrym cannot be killed, as he possesses a peculiar item that would result in the death of his attacker, even in the case of accidental death. The protagonist asks if he can leave now. Hong replies no, asserting that he will keep bothering Gangrym until he dies. He then launches an attack, but it fails. Gangrym notices Hong's movement and dodges the strike, saying that he wouldn't have come here if he thought they could capture him. He then engages in hand-to-hand combat with the camp guards. After defeating the first 2, he activates his hermit ability. Everyone is shocked to see Gangrym disappear, but the captain orders everyone to grab their weapons and surround the area to prevent his escape. The protagonist reappears, attacks a guard from behind, and vanishes again. He continues repeating this strategy, systematically defeating most of the group. The remaining guards, frightened, hesitate, but Hong orders them not to scatter, to close off the area, and warns that Gangrym isn't teleporting but simply turning invisible, which could create openings for him to move. Gangrym thinks it's already too late for them, as he had scattered several flammable fruits on the ground, emitting a sweet smell that distracted the enemies. While setting the camp ablaze, he admits he came out of curiosity, wanting to discover why, in his past life, he fought to the death. Now he knows it was because of the Destiny Protection Association. The fire spreads quickly through the camp, and demonic beasts begin approaching, drawn by the scent of the fruits. Gangrym walks away from the camp, reflecting on what Shin had said about hostages and deaths caused by the first-place rewards. He decides he cannot allow the same to happen again. As he heads toward Zone 1's lodging, he considers his next move. After some time, Gangrym arrives at the lodging and dumps the blue fruits on the ground. He calls everyone's attention, and as they turn to him, he explains that, as they already know, there are other groups in the demonic zone. Last night, he discovered another group planning to attack them. He then makes a proposal. He picks up one of the fruits from the ground and explains that it's called Heavenly Aroma, an item that will help them complete the attack on this room. He offers the fruits for free, with one condition. Everyone must agree to leave before Zone 1's group arrives. He explains there are enough fruits for everyone and suggests that the remaining fruits be distributed to members not present. Everyone thanks Gangrym for his initiative. Shin approaches Gangrym and asks if he would also reach the intermediate level with this. Gangrym turns his face away and replies that it's none of her business. Gangrym knows Shin isn't the type of person to endanger her companions, either out of greed or for others. The protagonist walks toward the forest, stating that he isn't part of her camp. As he does so, he is confident that Shin will calmly evacuate everyone, though he knows that, in this life, she won't be his ally. The girl watches Gangrym as he walks into the forest but says nothing. The protagonist heads to the last place where he encountered the demonic monster. He is intrigued because the beasts appeared suddenly, which is unusual, as demonic beasts don't simply materialize. Being creatures that inhabit demonic zones, they usually create dwelling areas like nests. Gangrym decides to investigate where the monsters are coming from. Following a demonic gorilla, Gangrym finds a passage inside a tree but doesn't understand how the creatures can enter such a narrow space. He approaches and begins crawling into the tree. Inside, he realizes the space is much larger than he had imagined. Upon reaching the ground, he starts walking, using his flame ability to light the way. Gangrym discovers an impressive place, one that even the gods consider amazing. They wonder if it could be the monster's home. The gods urge Gangrym to be careful, as they don't know where the monsters might appear. The protagonist, however, knows that this place is merely a crossing route for the monsters, not a battlefield, and recognizes it as the most dangerous spot in the entire demonic zone. Approaching another tree, Gangrym finds a new passage and concludes the demonic beasts might be deeper inside. He climbs the tree and picks a lucky fruit, fulfilling one of the conditions to complete the Great Tongue Room. As he descends, he thinks that now he only needs to get out without being caught, and everything will be resolved. However, an explosion occurs near where he is. Zone 1's group has also entered the location. Hong thanks Gangrym for finding the place, revealing that they've been following him ever since he visited the Zone 2 camp. Along the way, they found a girl. The protagonist freezes when he realizes that Gyul is with those lunatics, even dropping the fruit in shock. Hong taunts Gangrym, saying that even if he couldn't kill him, he could still kill his companions. He declares that if Gangrym hands over the fruit, he'll spare the girl's life. The protagonist, still frozen, says he has nothing to give and steps on the fallen fruit. He tells Hong that if he wants the fruit, he should climb the tree and get it himself. Hong orders his subordinates to climb the tree and pick the fruits while he holds the hostage. The henchmen eagerly rush to obey, asking their boss if he'll share the reward. Gangrym remains still and demands Hong release Gyul. The Zone 1 leader tells Gangrym to lower his blade first, then drops the girl to the ground, mocking the protagonist to pick her up if he dares. Gangrym lowers his sword and rushes to check on Gyul, examining her condition. He opens her mouth and gives her an antidote, attempting to revive her. Hong, intrigued, asks what Gangrym is doing. The protagonist responds that it's an antidote. Hong laughs, claiming Gyul wasn't poisoned, but he quickly notices his subordinates beginning to fall from the tree. On the ground, the men scream, saying they feel dizzy. Hong yells at his subordinates, demanding to know what's happening, but soon starts coughing up blood. At that moment, a message appears. You have been exposed to the scent of the lucky fruit for too long. Gangrym tells the Zone 1 leader that he's likely beginning to feel the effects of the poison now. Hong receives another message, informing him that he's being engulfed by the poisonous aroma of the lucky fruit. Not understanding why Gangrym isn't affected, he wonders how the protagonist knew this would happen, until he recalls the antidote Gangrym gave to the girl. Furious, Hong begins attacking Gangrym to try and obtain the antidote. With Gyul in his arms, the protagonist struggles to dodge the attacks, suffering minor injuries. A message soon appears, indicating that the poison is spreading rapidly through his wounds and that its strength will overpower his poison resistance, fully enveloping him in the toxic aroma. Gangrym admits he can't wait for Hong to succumb to the poison and decides to use his flame ability to intensify the fruit's venomous scent. This overwhelms Hong, who collapses to the ground, writhing in agony and nearing death. Seeing Gangnam hasn't left yet, Hong asks if he intends to die with him. Gangnam raises his lightning sword and replies that Hong will die alone. The captain, desperate, begins begging for mercy, offering to negotiate with the people who ordered the invasion of Zone 2. The protagonist ignores him, and as he delivers a fatal strike, he states that if Hong truly wanted to live, he shouldn't have threatened his companions. Before leaving, Gangnam activates his Fate Steal ability, extracting part of Hong's strength, as well as the magical power and agility of his subordinates. This action raises Gangnam's fate level to tertiary human rank. Sitting beside Gyul, Gangnam holds her hand and asks why she was following him. Receiving no response, he begins rummaging through his bag. The gods, panicked, comment that now isn't the time to relax. Seeing Gangnam take out the unknown egg, they are incredulous, believing he did all this just to hatch it. As the egg is removed, its growth rate reaches 100%, and it finally hatches. A magical servant appears, approaching its master and activating the purification ability upon touching him, dispelling all the poison and healing Gangnam. It doesn't take long for the fruit's venom to be completely purified by the servant. Now standing, Gangnam decides to gather all the fruits before burning them. He tells Gyul that if she's feeling better, she can help him. The two work together and finish quickly, leaving the area. As he helps the girl out of the tree, Gangnam notices Shin and Bomb approaching. The plant master comments that she was worried since she couldn't find them anywhere. Gangnam notices marks of combat on Shin and Bomb and asks if they're okay. Shin replies that they are fine since the priest healed everyone and that the stains are actually other people's blood. Bomb informs them that the men from Zone 1 who tried to invade the camp also fled, but she immediately begins scolding her sister for leaving on her own, saying she thought Gyul had been captured by the lunatics from Zone 1. Gangnam explains to Bomb that her sister had been taken hostage by the captain of Zone 1. Gyul tries to justify herself, saying it was supposed to be kept a secret so her sister wouldn't get angry, but it couldn't be helped. Shin tells Gangnam that he should have followed the girl. The protagonist responds that none of this would have happened if he had completed the intermediate level, but questions why Shin didn't leave when she had the chance. Shin says he couldn't leave him alone. Gangnam, trying to remain firm, tells the girl that she was very good at helping others, but she couldn't put herself and her friends in danger for the sake of strangers. The plant dominator asks the protagonist why he was so strange, as everyone there already considered him a companion. Smiling, she says that next time they will fight together. Gangnam is left speechless and receives a notification that his destiny with Shin has begun to intertwine, as has the destiny of Gyul and Bomb, who consider him a hero. Now the protagonist thinks it's too late to distance himself from them, so he decides to stay as part of the group. Gangnam returns to the lobby after completing the attack on the Chamber of Revelation. He cleared the attack on the highest difficulty level, and his first reward is a Guide of Destiny. This item reveals the best path, or something similar. The protagonist starts fiddling with the guide, but deduces that it might be automatic, preventing him from using it as he wanted. Unexpectedly, the item activates, spinning until a message appears. His destiny, his fate, has changed. Meanwhile, Gong in the association's chamber begins recalling past events, finding Gangnam's attack results very suspicious. He remembers that in the treasure chamber, the protagonist cleared the highest difficulty in a single day, and what was left in that room was highly suspicious. The leader of Zone 2 recalls a Navi mentioning a trainee who said there were crystals inside the frogs. Additionally, in the frozen hell chamber, Gangnam managed to kill a Yeti and complete a hidden mission. These events leave Gong intrigued and doubtful as to whether it was truly the protagonist who accomplished all that. Connecting the dots, Gong suspects that the seven-branched sword, which disappeared from the weapons chamber, might also have been Gangnam's doing. If not for that, Hong would have cleared the first attack on the Chamber of Revelation. Gong also remembers Xiaomun's desire to win, though she was worried nonetheless. She had mentioned that having a wish ticket for the chamber's best participants would be good, but no matter how much she thought about it, she couldn't understand how Gangnam managed to capture a magical beast. Capturing such a beast requires specific tricks, yet even with those, the chances are practically zero. Gong theorizes that it could have been an accident or divine intervention, but finds the situation odd regardless. He decides to investigate closely to determine whether Gangnam possesses the ability to read destinies. The boss heads to the lobby and calls the protagonist into a room, saying he would provide an additional reward as promised. After Gong opens a cabinet containing several weapons, Gangnam is amazed by what he sees, imagining that it could be a subspace inventory. The boss confirms it, explaining that it is a subspace inventory he uses as a personal arsenal, which he can access from anywhere as long as he has the key. This impresses the protagonist even more. Gong tells Gangnam that he can choose anything, as long as it's just one item from that room. The protagonist, analyzing the items, asks if it really can be anything. The boss confirms. Gong was testing him, having made some changes to the inventory before they entered the room. While examining the weapons, Gangnam admits they are all flashy, but of low quality, despite their beauty. They are made of very common materials and aren't sold as merchandise because they are classified as junk. This test was Gong's way of determining if Gangnam could truly read destinies. Without this ability, a person wouldn't be able to discern the quality of the items. For example, the Joseon King's Sword, a rank 1 weapon used by Taejon to slay a dragon, held great power but only against dragons. It was a sword feared by dragons, with a dragon's head carved into its hilt. This was a very well-made sword, so it was hard to tell that it was practically junk. Gong began to think it would be different if Gangnam could read destinies. Observing how he analyzed several items before making a choice, the leader admitted that he could have placed a single good weapon there, but instead, he had mixed in various noble-class items that were utterly useless. The protagonist quickly realized it was a test and thought that the team leader was quite intelligent. After some time analyzing, he believed he had found a good weapon, the Sword of Resilience, a rank 1 weapon. Gangnam hadn't expected the item to have such a rank and began to suspect the room wasn't ordinary. He deactivated his ability to see through destiny and became certain it was a test. He now noticed that the team leader seemed suspicious from the start, as he wasn't wearing the mask and gloves he always used. Gangnam figured it made sense since Gong was likely testing his abilities and possibly using an item to protect the inventory. Gangnam realized this wasn't good, as very few people had the ability to see destinies, and in his past life, Gong had tried to monopolize them all. He resolved not to let that happen again. Recognizing the need to hide his abilities, Gangnam still needed to choose a good item. After some thought, he turned to the leader standing at the door, who asked if he had made his choice. Gangnam replied affirmatively and pointed at Gong's hand, saying that was what he wanted. The team leader was surprised and asked if Gangnam wanted him. Embarrassed, the protagonist clarified that wasn't the case. Gong chuckled, saying he already knew he was the most valuable thing in the room but unfortunately could not be taken. Gangnam, stunned by what he was hearing, explained that he wasn't pointing at Gong himself, but rather at the key he was holding. The protagonist proposed borrowing all the weapons instead, arguing it would benefit everyone, as instead of claiming something valuable, he could borrow and return the items from Team 2 whenever needed. Gong, impressed by the idea, admitted it was an excellent suggestion and agreed. Back in his room, Gangnam was feeding dried ginseng to his reindeer. While the creature ate, the protagonist thought about training a bit, as it would take 3 days to deal with the key situation. Placing more food for the reindeer, he hadn't imagined he would spend 12,000 jade spiritual cores in a single day, barely managing to feed himself by selling soup. Seeing how much the creature enjoyed the food, he kept giving it more to eat and grow. Soon he was surprised. The magical beast evolved to the 2nd celestial rank and gained the ability to accumulate water. At this rank, the creature could freely manipulate water, gathering particles from the air. Wanting to understand this ability better, Gangnam asked the reindeer to throw water at the wall. The creature formed a large water ball, leaving its master impressed. But before he could tell it to stop, the reindeer unleashed its power at the wall. Gangnam was drenched, and the water ball left a massive hole in the wall, waking up his furious roommate. Meanwhile, Gyul and Bomb were eating in the cafeteria, where a group was also dining and reminiscing about how much they missed eating rice. Ryo mentioned he didn't want to see a fruit again for a long time. Yuja added that if it weren't for the soup Gangnam had made, he would have been in serious trouble. He also commented that he initially found the protagonist strange, but after this mission, Gangnam seemed like a pretty decent person. Ryo disagreed, saying he had always thought Gangnam was cool, and perhaps they had never truly noticed it before. He recalled how the protagonist had helped him when he was surrounded by demons in the snowy mountains, and again when he was bitten by a beast. Kaito asks his friend if that really happened. Ryo replies that it happened while he was exploring the map. After hearing his friend's story, Kaito comments that, on top of everything else, Gangnam had given them the mission fruit for free, proving he was really a good guy. The protagonist arrives at the cafeteria to eat and runs into Sungwon, who, upon seeing him, says he didn't expect Gangnam to be the first to complete an attack in any chamber. Gangnam asks if Sungwon himself had ever been the first to complete an attack. The magnate starts boasting, saying he was the first to complete the low difficulty level in the Chamber of Revelation. As they walk, the protagonist humors Sungwon, even though he finds his story dubious. After hearing how Sungwon was the first to succeed, Gangnam tells him he's impressive. Sungwon then suggests they chat since, now that they were in the lobby, none of the others could compare to them. Before Ganggrim can say anything, Sungwon invites him to eat rice and have a drink. He orders 2 drinks from the mascot, but the screen shows he doesn't have any spiritual cores left. Sungwon, irritated, tells the mascot to give them just 1 drink and promises to pay double later. The mascot holds up a sign that says, "Shut up, pauper," and slaps Sungwon in the face. Furious, Sungwon shouts that it's absurd since they don't know who he is. The mascot ignores him, and Sungwon's loud protests start attracting attention. Ganggrim, trying to calm him down, says he'll buy something to stop the yelling. Sungwon quickly changes his tone and asks if Ganggrim can pay. Already tired of the commotion, Ganggrim says he still has some spiritual cores in his wallet. Approaching the mascots, he asks how much the drinks cost. The screen shows free drinks for VIPs. The mascots begin preparing the drinks. Seeing this, Sungwon asks why Ganggrim is a VIP. Ganggrim guesses it might be because he spent 12,000 spiritual cores earlier and asks the mascot for just 1 drink. Sungwon is shocked, realizing how many cores that was for a single person. The mascot serves the drink to Ganggrim and stares at Sungwon, who becomes so enraged that he punches the mascot, shattering the glass along with the drink. Bom and Gyul, nearby, are startled by the scene. Ganggrim, not pleased with Sungwon's behavior, asks why he did that. Sungwon tells him to shut up, calling him a traitor, and stomps away grumbling. Ganggrim doesn't understand why he was called a traitor, but Bom approaches and asks if he's friends with the magnate. The protagonist replies no. Meanwhile, Gyul checks on the mascot and suggests taking it to the infirmary to make sure it's okay. She also asks why Ganggrim was hanging out with that man. Ganggrim explains they're roommates and had ordered lunch together after he broke the wall with the magical beast. The girls, curious, ask about the magical beast. Ganggrim shows them the reindeer, and they're enchanted. Bom asks what the creature's name is. The protagonist jokes, saying it's just Beast. Gyul scolds him, saying he should give it a real name. Bom agrees. After thinking for a while, Ganggrim decides to name her Rini. Upon naming the beast, her rank increases to Precious, and she gains the ability Magnetic Horns. This celestial first-rank ability allows her to attract metallic objects or change their direction. Gyul asks if Rini evolved or something. Ganggrim, impressed, admits he didn't know she could do that, saying she truly feels like his now. Bom tells the protagonist it's thanks to them that he made this discovery. Smiling, the protagonist says she's right, and thanks both of them for their help. Gyul covers her sister's mouth and suggests to Ganggrim that he take the 2 of them on the next mission. The protagonist replies that they were already going together anyway. A week later, the door opened, and they entered the Serpent Room, where they were tasked with protecting something for 168 hours. Rio wonders what they are supposed to protect, and starts imagining that it might be the shed nearby. Achatsia comes out of the shed and greets everyone, introducing himself as Jung, the person in charge of the room. Before Jung can continue his explanation, Shin asks Bom if she knows anything about this. The girl says that, thinking about it, this room also has a mission window like the others. Ganggrim, however, is confused, as he doesn't understand why the association didn't send a Navi, since it wasn't like this in his past life. Jung asks everyone for their attention and says the association has just updated and sent the mission details to everyone, but he will still provide an explanation. Some people hadn't even read the details sent to their devices at the start. Jung explains that the mission is straightforward. They need to protect a snake. Some people are surprised by the simplicity of the task. Jung clarifies that, more specifically, they must tame and protect a snake by tying a friendship symbol, a piece of cloth, around its neck. After explaining, he asks everyone to come forward to collect a cloth so they can start looking for a snake. The details of the Serpent Room are as follows. Each person must tame 1 snake, tie the friendship symbol around its neck, and protect it for 168 hours. The second rule is that they are free to leave the Serpent Room, but if the snake dies while they are away, the mission will be considered a failure. The third condition states that the snakes cannot leave the room, but can be left in the care of the room manager for up to 6 hours per day. During this time, the snake will be protected, and in emergencies, the mission will continue as long as the snake remains alive. The fourth rule is to be careful not to confuse a snake with a serpent. Everyone begins searching for snakes across the map. Bom and Gyul are looking together, but since they aren't finding any, the archer suspects there might not be enough snakes for everyone. Gojun manages to catch 2 snakes and, comparing them, wonders if there's a larger one somewhere. The priest, while searching, is startled by a snake striking at him and nearly getting bitten. Seeing this, Shin warns him to be more careful. Sungwon finds a snake and ties the cloth around its neck, triggering a message that he must protect the snake for 168 hours. He hands the creature to his subordinates, telling them to take care of it. One of them suggests that it would be better for the magnate to stay close to the snake. but he refuses, insisting that they take care of it while he walks away laughing, bragging that he caught a snake before Gangram and might even complete the mission first. His subordinates are reluctant, noting that this goes against the rules and questioning why Sungwon seems so bent on getting revenge on Gangram. Meanwhile, Gangram is crossing a bridge toward the forest, wondering if that's how things are going to play out, when he receives a message that his destiny has begun to change. He imagines it's because he was the first to complete the mission in the Chamber of Revelation, unlike in his past life. He also notices that the association kept the room closed for a longer period this time, and even changed the person in charge. Gangram admits that many things have changed, and he doesn't know exactly why. Once again, a message appears, saying the protagonist's destiny has begun to change, and that everything will return to normal if he goes back to his original place. He begins to think this has to do with what he's trying to accomplish. The item, the symbol of friendship, was a personal item, and equipping it on a monster reduced its hostility. The effect varied depending on the target's rank. The protagonist had been standing still for a while, unsure of what to do. The gods began asking if he wasn't going to look for a snake, and if not, they might entertain themselves with him. Gangram admitted he was going crazy and that staying there thinking wouldn't help. He decided to act. Taking off his shirt, he called Rini to join him and jumped into the river. The gods were baffled, not understanding what the protagonist was doing. Underwater, Gangram began searching for a snake. The guardians questioned why he would look for a snake in the water and wondered how long a human could hold their breath. Thanks to his water attribute, the protagonist's breath-holding duration was increased by 20%. He asked Rini to activate her water accumulation ability. A message appeared. Gangram was affected by the ability and could now breathe and move freely underwater. It didn't take long before he spotted a snake crawling along the riverbed, but he ignored it and swam deeper. The gods asked why he didn't catch the snake nearby, but Gangram paid no attention and kept diving. The guardians thought it was impossible for there to be snakes in such a place. Hearing this, Gangram realized they didn't understand his true intention. He wasn't there for just any snake. He was after something stronger. Suddenly, Gangram sensed a monster behind him, ready to attack. He immediately used his weapon to block the creature's assault. He had equipped General Wushu's halberd, capable of withstanding such a monster. Holding the creature's tongue in its mouth, Gangram observed it and thought it was too big to be a snake, but too small to be a dragon. It was exactly what he was looking for. All he needed to do now was tie the symbol of friendship, and he would be done. As he was tying the item to the monster's tongue, he realized it was building up a power inside its mouth that would attack him without warning. Rini activated her magnetic horns ability, creating a water current that pulled her master out of the monster's mouth just in time to avoid the attack. The creature didn't stop chasing Gangram, who remained inside the water current controlled by Rini. The monster changed direction and aimed for the reindeer, but before it could reach the magical beast, the protagonist began tying the symbol of friendship to the serpent. The serpent resisted, but Gangram held on tightly, refusing to give up until he successfully tied the cloth around the serpent, which now obeyed his commands. The gods were impressed, marveling at how Gangram had managed to tame a serpent. However, they questioned whether the creature's angry eyes might indicate it still saw him as an enemy. Gangram signaled the serpent to leap out, and it obeyed, jumping out of the water while its master held on. Once outside, the protagonist petted the creature and told it he needed to protect it for a week, though he knew it wasn't necessary. He explained that the cloth would disappear in a week, and in the meantime, the serpent should stay in the water as much as possible. Listening to him, the serpent dove back into the river. The gods wondered if the protagonist wouldn't spend more time with the creature, but then realized it was a serpent and didn't need much protection. Gangram, now laughing to himself, enjoyed the thought of having a week off after completing the task. The guardian reminded him not to leave the serpent alone, as they were now friends. The protagonist headed to the forest to hunt monsters and level up. After defeating a group of beasts, his strength evolved to level 26. Along with his strength, his speed and perception also reached level 26, while his mana and energy increased to level 23. Gangram acknowledges that, even though his stats are improving, it's a shame he can only level up by hunting, now that all he needs is to collect spiritual cores. He tells Rini to rest for a bit. The gods comment that the magical beast is very kind, and it's unfortunate she doesn't like blood, as she could be much more useful, but they recognize that she did a good job helping the protagonist earlier. While collecting the cores, Gangram notices that Rini doesn't seem well, and assumes it must be hard for her to go out hunting since she dislikes blood. Suddenly, he hears screams coming from not too far away and wonders why people are fighting in a beginner's room. He suspects it might have something to do with Zone 1's group, so he quickly calls Rini to go check it out. At the waterfall, Gangram sees Sungwon arguing with his subordinates, shouting that he won't pay them if they continue like that. Gangram stays alert, trying to understand the reason behind the commotion. Ravi, furious, declares he'll give back the magnate's money and that Sungwon doesn't need to count on them for anything anymore. He turns and begins to walk away, saying he's leaving because he's had enough. Amit tells Sungwon that he too is tired of hearing him say that Gangram is better, and if that's all he's going to talk about, he should have just called Gangram from the start. Gangram is baffled, wondering why they're fighting over him. The gods urge Gangram to go talk to Sungwon, suggesting that he might be struggling, and if Gangram helped him, he might gain forgiveness. Besides, they argue, he should do it for Rini, who had to endure seeing so much blood. The protagonist starts to wonder if the magnate is angry with him because of what happened in the cafeteria. Feeling a twinge of guilt, he calls out to Sungwon. Upon seeing Gangram, Sungwon desperately asks for help, explaining that he has a problem with his snake. He says he was attacked in the forest and lost the snake, but doesn't know where it went. Gangram starts running through the forest with the magnate to recover the snake. Along the way, he asks if he'll be paid for his help. Sungwon, irritated, retorts that he hasn't even gotten lunch yet to fix the hole in the wall. Gangram stops running and says he doesn't work for free, suggesting Sungwon pay him back for lunch later. Furious, Sungwon agrees to pay 2,000 for the job. Gangram questions how he can afford to pay now, when he claimed to have nothing before. After the payment transfer is complete, a message pops up for Sungwon. The life of the target equipped with the symbol of friendship is below half. This sends Sungwon into a panic as he shouts that his snake is dying and they need to find it immediately. It doesn't take long for Gangram to find the magnate's snake, which is being attacked by someone from Zone 1. Before the person notices, Gangram approaches and blocks the attack just as it's about to hit the snake. Akira demands to know which district Gangram is from, arguing that he found the snake first, and Gangram should go find another. The protagonist grabs the snake and tosses it to Sungwon, who's approaching. Sungwon frantically tries to stabilize the snake, even pulling out medicines to save it. Akira is left speechless, watching the scene. The magnate then turns to Akira and demands to know why he was trying to kill his snake, pointing out that it already had the symbol of friendship and that Akira should go find another snake to protect. Akira asks why he would do that. Gangram explains that the mission in this room is to protect a snake. Akira, confused, replies that his mission is to kill a snake. Sungwon and Gangram are shocked to hear this. Gangram immediately recalls that the mission is different from his past life and realizes that the change in his destiny means that, in his past life, everyone's mission was to protect the snakes. Back then, they could even cooperate with people from District 3 to protect the snakes from other monsters. The protagonist remembers the man who led the other team in his past life and had attacked and killed the river serpent. Recalling this, he panics, especially when he receives the message that the target equipped with the symbol of friendship is under attack. He deduces that if someone from District 3 is attacking the monster, it must be the same man who helped Shin in his previous life. Jang is being attacked by the serpent, but manages to dodge. Facing the creature, he wonders if it might even be a dragon. He decides to kill it and charges forward to complete his mission. Gangram approaches to defend his beast and confirms that it is indeed the person he was imagining. Jang lands a few punches on the serpent, nearly defeating it, when Gangram steps in to defend it. At the same time, Rini uses her water control to shield the monster. The boxer demands to know what Gangram is doing, blocking his attacks. Seeing him up close, Gangram recognizes Jang and recalls that they were friends in his past life. The boxer, a celestial second ranker, was affiliated with the secret gate. Gangram remembers their last conversation before Baek killed him. He admits that this is the same Jang from his past life and feels happy to see him again, even though he hadn't expected it. Jang, on the other hand, says this is his first time seeing Gangram and claims he spotted the monster first. Gangram tells the serpent to return to the water and not come back up. Confused as to why the creature fled, Jang grows irritated and declares he'll kill Gangram instead. Seeing this reaction, Gangram remarks that this is indeed their first time meeting in this life, explaining that in their past life, they met through the guild. He also notices that Jang's appearance is different, and that he's not with Harang. Gangram recalls a past conversation where Jang mentioned being grateful they had met in the magical castle, as he had been a bit rude before. Observing him now, the protagonist imagines that if he had met Jang earlier in his past life, things might have turned out like this. Gangram tries to calm Jang, telling him to find another snake because this one is already his. The bad boy doesn't understand and asks why it's his but doesn't wait for an answer, launching an attack and declaring he'll take Gangram down first. Gangram dodges without much difficulty, but Jang doesn't relent and attacks again. This time, Gangram defends himself with his sword, and upon feeling the impact, admits that Jang wasn't lying about his dark past and strength. The boxer asks why Gangrim is laughing, wondering if he finds the situation amusing. The protagonist replies that it is amusing because Jang is alive. He switches his attribute to fire and counters. Seeing that Jang defends easily, Gangrim acknowledges that Jang has more skill and strength than he does. He wonders how he's being overwhelmed despite being obviously stronger. Jang counterattacks, telling him to shut up, but in doing so, leaves an opening. Gangrim seizes the opportunity, striking Jang in the stomach and knocking him to the ground, leaving him defenseless. Gangrim admits that he managed this because he knows Jang's fighting patterns, but doesn't let his guard down, placing his sword at Jang's neck and asking if they shouldn't stop there. Jang agrees and runs off, shouting that he'll beat Gangrim later. Gangrim watches him leave, finding this version of the boxer amusing, but also worrying that if Jang continues like this, he might not bond with Shin or return to the Secret Gate Guild. The protagonist also fears that if the plant dominator meets this version of Jang, he might end up dead. But now that he's aware, Gangrim resolves not to let it happen. By late afternoon, Gangrim approaches Sungwon, who is furious with the Chachia, accusing him of failing to warn them that people from other districts would be trying to kill the snakes. Jung responds indifferently, asking if it would have made any difference, since one of the mission's requirements is to protect the creature. The magnate grabs the Chachia by the tie but reconsiders, ultimately doing nothing and walking away, grumbling as he always does. The protagonist greets Jung, who, upon seeing him, says he's free to ask anything. Gangrim asks why the goal of the Guardians of Destiny, which was supposed to help people awaken their blessings and grow stronger, now involves creating deliberate conflict between districts. Jung explains that the aim was to heat things up a bit for challengers who weren't yet very skilled. Gangrim questions which challengers those might be. Jung smirks and says he doesn't understand why Gangrim is complaining since he just benefited by receiving an item from a guardian. The protagonist can't believe a Chachia is trying to pin the problems on him. Smiling, Jung adds that this time the association hadn't done anything too extreme, and if Gangrim cooperated a little, he'd clear the room quickly. Gangrim dislikes Jung's attitude but chooses not to respond. The next day, the protagonist returns after resting in the lobby. 22 hours had passed since his snake was being protected. The gods are excited to see Gangrim back, eager to watch him in action again. Upon arriving, Gangrim wonders if anything happened while he was away, but since there were no notifications about his snake being attacked, he assumes everything is fine. Suddenly, he senses something approaching him and grabs his sword. He sees a figure crossing the bridge quickly, causing an explosion as it lands. It's Jang, who punches the ground and announces he's been looking for the protagonist. Gangrim asks what he wants. Jang prepares a strike, saying he just wants to return the favor from before, and launches an attack. The protagonist defends himself with his sword, blocking the blows, but it doesn't take long for him to recognize Jang's fighting pattern and adapt. However, when Gangrim least expects it, Jang switches to using kicks. Though surprised, Gangrim manages to block and remarks that things won't be as easy as before since his opponent has changed his attack pattern after realizing Gangrim was blocking everything. But as Gangrim watches Jang's footwork, he remembers this was a fighting habit Jang had in his past life and realizes it hasn't changed much. Jang laughs, saying he finally landed a hit. Gangrim asks why Jang is so determined to fight when he could have just gone after another snake. Jang replies that it's because he lost before, and he hates losing. The protagonist recalls that Jang used to love fighting stronger opponents, but this memory feels faint since Gangrim in his past life was never a worthy opponent. Now, however, Gangrim finds it odd that Jang is happy to see him this way. Wasting no time, Gangrim activates his flame ability, knowing he doesn't want to die and put everyone in danger. Jang says he's ready and dares Gangrim to attack. The protagonist declares himself prepared and activates his combat instincts. The bad boy gets into position and taunts Gangrim, asking if he really thinks he can defeat him, warning it won't be like last time. Now more in control of his abilities, Gangrim blocks the first strike and compliments Jang, saying he's incredibly strong and that he likes it. Despite Jang's skill, he struggles to land a hit on Gangrim, who manages to grab his arm and strike him with his sword, commenting how thrilling it is to take down strong opponents. Jang is confused, realizing Gangrim has been targeting his vital points since the fight began, which means the protagonist is trying to kill him. Jang doesn't recall his opponent ever looking at him with such hatred before. Deciding he must act quickly, Jang resolves to retaliate, knowing that if he doesn't, he'll lose again. The boxer lands a punch on Gangrim's chest with such force that it breaks his bones, leaving him nearly unconscious. As he falls, the protagonist thinks about how he has to kill Jang, who is preparing another attack. Even with his mind clouded, his sole focus is on killing his opponent, but he doesn't know how he'll manage it with his limited mobility. Suddenly, a message appears. The fighting instinct skill has been improved. temporarily restoring sanity. Ganggrim manages to block the boxer's attack and says that his consciousness has finally returned. Jang notices his opponent has activated his flame mode and takes a step back. The protagonist, brimming with malice, tells Jang that he's been thinking of ways to kill him. Jang, shocked to see Ganggrim still standing despite his broken chest bones, starts to run while Ganggrim relentlessly attacks, declaring that no pain can stop him. As Jang falls to the ground, Ganggrim announces that now he'll finish him off. The bad boy surrenders, saying there's no need for anyone to die. But just then, a message pops up. Due to a lack of mana, both the fighting instinct and flame abilities have been deactivated. Realizing this, Ganggrim admits he didn't win and proposes calling it a draw. He turns away and tells Jang to give up and find another snake to complete his mission. Jang insists he'll return the next day, and even if he loses again, he'll keep coming back. Ganggrim pleads for him not to, but Jang persists, declaring that one day he'll win. The gods, frustrated with the fight, comment that Jang could have just found another snake and avoided all this. Ganggrim returns to the lobby to recover, thinking about how stubborn Jang is and how much he hates losing, which means he won't stop anytime soon. At the recovery room, Ganggrim sees some people talking to Anavi, visibly upset. They're furious with the people from District 3 trying to kill the snakes, and to make matters worse, they can't even find another snake to protect. Anavi explains that District 2's mission is to protect the snakes, and since they've failed, they should understand that they'll be disqualified once the mission period ends. The people are outraged at the association for not warning them about this earlier. Ganggrim, intrigued to learn that this is District 2's mission, takes the opportunity to whisper an idea into Anavi's ear. The Chachia apparently likes the idea and comments that it might work. Back in the room, the protagonist admits it's now practically impossible for him to lose. He summons Rini and begins hunting in the forest. However, at the 49-hour mark of protection, Jang returns to fight him. The same thing happens at the 75-hour mark, and again at 100 hours, but each time, the boxer fails to win. Jang returns yet again the next day, at the 119-hour mark, and once more at 145 hours. After being defeated again, he grows frustrated and asks Ganggrim why his body keeps turning into a ball of fire during their fights. Ganggrim explains that it's his skill, and obviously he's going to keep using it. The boxer, exhausted, asks if it's really necessary to use that ability every day in their fights. Ganggrim replies that it is, or else he'd lose. Once again, Jang leaves, saying he'll return the next day. The gods comment that both of them are insane. However, noticing something odd about the snake, they ask Ganggrim what it's doing. He sees that the creature has come out and is staring at him. Realizing it wants something, he asks if it's hungry. The snake approaches and opens its mouth. Ganggrim places a sack of meat inside and says that's all he has for now, but warns the snake not to come out when he's away. He also asks it not to tell Rini he fed it, promising to give it more later. The Guardian tells the protagonist that he's spoiling that snake too much. Gyul and Bomb approach and ask Ganggrim what he's doing. He replies that he's taking care of his snake. Bomb says she's jealous, noting how her master's snake always leaves whenever someone approaches, whereas hers never leaves her side for even a minute. Gyul notices Ganggrim's bruised face and immediately guesses it was the guy from District 3 again. She asks why he doesn't just go after another snake. Ganggrim laughs and says he's using these fights as training, so it's fine. Bomb grabs her master's shirt and says it's not fine, insisting he shouldn't be saying such things since it's awful to see him in that state. They continue arguing, as the girls refuse to accept his reasoning. Meanwhile, Ganggrim's snake has followed Jang, who is gathered with a group from his district. They're discussing getting the boxers' help to kill the snakes from District 2, reasoning that even though they're strong, they can't handle so many people at once. Jang refuses, saying he's only interested in defeating one person. Taichi reassures him, saying that if it's Ganggrim, he knows a way to beat him. The snake, overhearing this conversation, doesn't like it at all and submerges into the water. The bad boy notices something strange in the lake but turns back to ask his companion what this plan entails. Another day passes, and Ganggrim is near the river, talking to his snake, when he notices the boxer approaching. Jang declares that this is the last day, and asks what Ganggrim will do if he loses again, suggesting he'd be better off finding another snake. Ganggrim tells Jang to stop talking nonsense since they can't know if he'll lose again. Hearing this, the protagonist already suspects his opponent won't give up. He proposes a bet since it's the last day. Ganggrim says that if he wins, Jang must do whatever he asks. The boxer asks what happens if it's the other way around. Ganggrim activates his flame ability and confidently says there's no chance of him losing.
If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and like the video. Thank you.